Chapter 945. Zhanhe, the Lord of Zhanhe. For Luo Nan, who had just left the relay station, this was already a symbolic name. It was the most important landmark in the history of the heavenly Yuan Empire. There was no other. Luo Nan's knowledge of the Lord of Zhanhe's life was still rather vague, due to the severe limitations of his knowledge regarding sacrifice. All he knew was that he was the founder of the heavenly Yuan Empire, one of the most powerful beings in the universe. In fact, in the history of the heavenly Yuan Empire, there was nothing wrong with the label of the Lord of Zhan, he being the most powerful being. Luo Nan's lack of knowledge regarding the history of the heavenly Yuan Empire could only allow his thoughts to diverge to this degree. It was quite impossible for his eyes to be brimming with tears for the legacy of the founding emperor. Then he thought of something more realistic. Authority. Such a character. Such a large card. The external neuron's strict authority settings. Were there no restrictions in this aspect? Luo Nan didn't feel that there were too many authority restrictions in the relay station. It wasn't that the restrictions were loose. Instead, within the precise and complete system, many meaningless reminders or obstacles had already become formless. If you couldn't see it, then you couldn't see it. Basically, you wouldn't be given a corresponding mission. However, Luo Nan had soaked in it for a long time. He had a certain understanding of the authority of the heavenly Yuan Empire. It could be said that there were differences in levels. From Luo Nan's perspective, the social hierarchy and authority system of the heavenly Yuan Empire was a rather typical multi-channel model. Within the strict hierarchical division, several specialized channels were open to allow them to operate in parallel. The most common ones included the nobility system, the professional system, and the knowledge system. Some of these were specialized nouns. Luo Nan could only roughly translate and understand them. Officer, nobility. These were the system of military service officials. Bachelor, technician, teacher. These were the system of social professions. General, specialist, heaven ladder. These were the system of academic knowledge. Basically, they were all rank 3, rank 9. In addition, there was a series of complicated cultivation orders. But in general, they could be summarized into 3 stages. Namely, internal cultivation, smelting, and innovation. Mentally, Luo Nan corresponded them with the awakened, architect, and extraordinary of the inner world system. These channels were either parallel or intersecting. Together, they formed the solid talent structure and knowledge system of the heavenly Yuan Empire, as well as strict value judgments. The knowledge of configuration and creation that Luo Nan had learned was incorporated into it. Each had a precondition and a continuation, forming a complete hierarchy of learning and research. The special point here was that the innovation in the cultivation system was often confused with the ladder to heaven in the academic knowledge system. The reason for this was that the first level of the celestial stairway was the most special. It was a stage of innovation in learning and cultivation, and it was the exploration and summary of the Dharma and logos of the universe. It was boundlessly profound, and it wasn't something that could be covered by just 3 levels. Therefore, every 100 years, the ranking of the heaven stairway would be discussed by the various academies and research institutes of the heavenly Yuan Empire. Then, the Senate would decide whether to increase or decrease the ranking. Ever since the establishment of the heavenly Yuan Empire, the heaven stairway had grown from the most primitive 3 steps to the 13 steps that Luo Nan knew of. It had grown by a full 10 steps. Every increase in level represented great progress in the research and cultivation system of the Imperium. Moreover, it was said that almost the same number of times of reduction was hidden within, further proving the solid and rigorous side of this system. And above this ranking system was the level of Grand Monarch. The reason why it transcended above was because the level of Grand Monarch was the true transcendent realm, the immortal power, and the study that transcended limits. Aside from a portion of knowledge laws that were integrated into the 13 steps of the heaven stairway, the general cultivation order and standards were already quite different from the understanding of ordinary people. Luo Nan had yet to come into contact with the specific content, so he had no way of talking about it. From this point of view, the initial privileges of the external neuron were set at the NCO rank for resource transfer and expert-level knowledge search. This was already a mid-level authorization. Most of the high-level knowledge that Luo Nan had come into contact with at the relay station was at this level. As for after passing the offline test, his knowledge access had risen to the 4th level of the celestial ladder, and what he had access to was already common knowledge that only teachers, dignitaries, and at the very least, elite officers had. Well, of course, special talents like Lieutenant Loaned were a different story. As for the domain involved in the 2 privileges, resource transfer and such, he was still muddle-headed. It seemed that it was related to the virtual brain systems analysis and the inner universe's simulator. Comparatively speaking, pure knowledge search was the most suitable for the current Luo Nan. In any case, according to Luo Nan's understanding of the ranking system of the Heavenly Yuan Empire, the NCO rank and the Heaven Stairway rank were all fine. No matter how much one raised one's rank, they were still on the ordinary level within the Heavenly Yuan system. They were in the domain of comprehensible. Once they were linked to Lord John He, they would instantly rise to an inconceivable level. Even though this thesis with a rather long title appeared to be only a portion of some great work, it seemed to be some thesis or teaching material upon closer inspection. There were elements of imparting knowledge, but was it really possible? It should be possible, Luo Nan said to himself. The privileges of the external neuron were both restrictions and insurance. So far it seemed that other than blocking him, testing him, and making things difficult for him, the external neuron basically maintained a good level of security. As for the others, according to Luo Nan's personal understanding and experience, he could clearly sense and understand the information on the level of information search and integration. Even though he only saw the title, the most important thing was that it had already come to this. What was he hesitating for? Luo Nan pondered and hesitated. In the end, he had the external neuron report that his privileges were insufficient. That would truly be a joke. Luo Nan laughed to himself. His mind relaxed, and his telepathic thoughts touched the results of the search. He tried to flip through the information on Lord John He's article like he did with the lamination interference technology. Luo Nan's consciousness became slightly dazed in the next second. A pop-up window appeared on the virtual brain interface, but it passed in a flash. It seemed as if nothing had happened. And this work, elaborated by the highest-level author, had already been released to Luo Nan. He thought that he would have to read, translate, understand, and so on, but there was none. Only bright sparks of electricity suddenly flashed within the haze of the mental plane. Right now, Luo Nan's mental plane was filled with haze. The corrosive process of the Sunwheel Absolute Hell and the sinful poison pollution was still ongoing, forming an endless dense fog. The imitation show of the heavily chained crow and the wraith sign was also gradually entering a fine state. Bright red light seeped through the depths of the chaotic fog, faintly illuminating the outline and some fragments. When the article transformed into zigzagging lightning and pierced into the fog, it collided with the chaotic scene. But there was no conflict. Instead, it was simply projected. It was like a unique printing machine. It used the fog as a medium to brush out group after group of bizarre graphic symbols. It looked like the eye that Luo Nan had inexplicably grasped. The secret sign was a combination of the central region's pictograms and highly generalized symbols. It was as if they came from the same source. There was no doubt that Luo Nan could not understand a single one of them. Even if he had the eye secret sign to translate, he would not be able to understand them in a short amount of time. But during this process, he vaguely grasped a few things behind the scenes. The main thing was the external neuron that carried and activated the electricity. It was a few fragments of the operation of the black box. More accurately speaking, it was configuration, faith, and the great limit. A rational reconstruction of the evolution of history from ignorance to dawn. The magneto-optic mica chapter. This article had already transformed into electricity, and its source of information. This was because even at this time, the electro-optic printer was still drawing an endless stream of information from many channels and many directions. The information was then transformed into strange characters and symbols that filled the sky. Aside from the external neuron, there was also the half-decayed altar spiderweb, and even the Sunwheel Absolute Hell. A considerable portion of this work of the Lord of Deep Harmony was actually extracted and precipitated from the flood of information from the Sunwheel Absolute Hell. This It was no wonder. It turned out that a considerable part of this content was completed from the outside world. At the very least, from Luo Nan's understanding of the situation, the external neuron's database didn't have an absolute advantage. Thus, the external neuron's own authority system was unable to restrain Luo Nan. It tacitly agreed that Luo Nan possessed the relevant authority. The number of electro-optic characters increased endlessly. But as the density increased, the flavor of the characters and symbols grew fainter and fainter. Instead, the appearance of a configuration design was vividly displayed. What followed was an even more concrete and detailed physical structure. From the characters to the configuration. From the configuration to the physical. From the abstract to the concrete. As he explored step by step, Luo Nan's consciousness began to dance along with it. In his daze, it was as if he had once again experienced the 70 hours of his life at the relay station. But this time the focus was different. His consciousness left the base and entered the vaster world. He looked at the towering structure of clouds that was like a ship and a mountain. He looked at how it made adjustments, how it summoned the Hellfire Tyrant, and how it mobilized its military forces. Of course, there was also the image of the Hellfire Tyrant, but it was much more blurry. In this way, not a single one of the three parties that clashed at the relay station was missed. They all fell into Luo Nan's eyes, allowing him to observe them from a comprehensive and objective perspective. Luo Nan had similar experiences during his offline tests, but he didn't understand them as clearly as he did now. In the end, Backtrack concluded with the exceptionally clear and clear shadow cockroach. What was this? How could Luo Nan see the logic in this instant? But he faintly sensed that he could only approach things from the perspective of concrete images. The deeper level of jurisprudence might be fatal. Luo Nan found a good analogy. He was like Yin Lu's snake tongue and cat eyes of the past. He had entered a movie theater to experience the unfathomable demonstration of the rules. The movie finally came to an end. The lights lit up, but Luo Nan discovered that this wasn't a movie theater. He didn't return to that bewildering, chaotic and foggy environment. His consciousness had actually led him into a grand and imposing hall. He couldn't see the structure of the palace too clearly. All he knew was that it was inconceivably vast and grand. There were no pillars or shadows blocking the way at all. All he could see were the numerous statues scattered about. There was also mist and mist circulating within. Some of these statues were far away. Some were close. Some were blurry. Some were clear. Some were simply the mist itself. They would suddenly coalesce into form, and then vanish into thin air. Chapter 946. It seems to be quite advanced. Right now, Luo Nan could calmly face all sorts of unexpected situations. Could there be a scene more inconceivable than this seemingly real relay station? His consciousness remained within the misty palace. He did not rush to a conclusion. Instead, he quietly waited, sensed, and observed this palace. In the end, he saw the origin of this palace and what it was supported by. Luo Nan observed for a period of time due to his limited cracking of the black box of the external neuron. He was basically certain that this misty palace was a product of information aggregation. It was just countless complex information and data that followed some mechanism to produce an image projection on the mental plane. This was not a preset program of the external neuron. It was more like Luo Nan was in full contact with the flood of information and data through multiple channels. It was a foundation of mutual compromise and passive choice. First was the hairy embryo formed from the aggregation of information structures. According to Luo Nan's current understanding, every information channel represented a type of information structure. The external neuron was the systematic storage of data. The Sunwheel Absolute Hell was the aggregation model of the shattered rules and information. The evil poison was a negative state that severely distorted the rules and information. There was also the alter spider web. It was a kind of intermediate state where information was transmitted, received, precipitated, and selected. The elements inside were even more complex. There were even millions and millions of living beings that had shallow or deep involvement and influence. It could be said that it was the place where the greatest variable was born. When they collided together, it would be fine if it was just a simple flow of information. It was very likely that they would influence and pollute each other. In the end, they would become completely chaotic and become meaningless noise. The problem was that these completely different information structures possessed rather stubborn and established patterns. Yet they possessed a similar foundation in a certain sense. They possessed a relatively unified source, and the effects and infiltration they carried out on each other possessed the meaning of order and rules. Luonan could understand and utilize them. Luonan believed that this was a good phenomenon. It had great potential. Perhaps in the future, when he encountered more similar channels or information structures, he could handle them according to the rules and form a pattern. There was nothing much to say about the more specific things. This was because what drove these information channels to fully combine was an academic article written by Master Zhanhe with an extremely long title. This could be considered a half-formed mold placed there. It naturally gathered and carried the powder of information. Even 1 out of 10,000 was enough to need a hairy embryo from within. Well, the process of information structures permeating each other was more interesting. Next was the hairy embryo that Luonan had created himself. This was the process of becoming more and more familiar with the flow. Luonan was the central axis where all information converged. He was the small wooden stick that produced cotton candy. He stirred within the flood of information, allowing the chaotic information to interweave and form a shape that held fundamental meaning to him. Finally, it was another round of interaction, influence and infiltration between the two hairy embryos. In the process, the overly profound rules and doctrines that belonged to the article were probed from the theoretical level, evolving into a configuration and turning into a concrete image when the cotton candy could not reflect it in time. Eventually, in the chaotic haze, the two hairy embryos melted and turned into the Temple of Fog. Luonan was truly just a hairy embryo. This included the structure of the Misty Palace. Luonan's current visible and perceptible form mostly belonged to the intermediate state between chaos and concrete form. It was just that there were a few individuals that looked a little more gorgeous. The reason for this, aside from the difference in the depth of Luonan's understanding and perception, was that some external objects were mixed in as well. For example, amnesia. Luonan subconsciously touched his face. He was completely unable to sense any non-physical sensation. However, the strange item woven from the laminated interference spirit core was indeed still covering his face. Moreover, under Luo Nanyun's mist cover and the stimulation of his highly active soul strength, it was similarly active. From Omniscia's perspective, the floating and flowing smoke and dust of information within the haze on Luonan's mental plane were its nutrients. They could be used to replenish and enrich its collection. Naturally, it needed to absorb them. More importantly, in the process of absorbing nutrients, the Order of Invisible Veil, the mask behind the heavy curtains of smoke, also took the initiative to seep into the hair embryo of the Fog Palace, becoming an important element of the Fog Palace. Oh, speaking of which, the two were quite similar. They both embodied the visualization and template-based processing of certain laws of power. Speaking of which, did Liang Lu refer to Lord Zhanhe's article when researching the laminated interference technique? The data presented in the database was very suspicious. Luonan wanted to laugh, but his heart suddenly froze. He was unable to laugh. His consciousness began to wander around the Misty Palace. It was as if he was strolling through it. One sculpture after another, either clear or blurry, flowed before his eyes. His consciousness wandered about, constantly changing angles. It was as if he had blended with the misty mist of the palace, turning into a casually wiped gauze. It was unknown where he would linger. Sometimes he would wipe that place more cleanly. Sometimes he would make it more chaotic. Among them, the clearest was the shadow cockroach. As for the reason, it was probably because he had encountered it at the end of the battle at the relay station. It had nearly taken his life, so it left a deep impression on him. Of course, it was also possible that space-time configurations were his strong suit, so he had a deeper understanding of them. However, the next one exceeded Luonan's expectations. In terms of clarity, it was only inferior to the shadow cockroach. It was actually the magneto-optical mica jellyfish. Its mist was chaotic and had no fixed shape. It was similar to the environment of the Misty Palace, so it should have been the hardest to distinguish. But when Luo Nan's consciousness shifted over, he had quite a few intuitive feelings towards the seemingly random changes in the structure and flow. He was often able to find the first opportunity and make a judgment that it should be like this. It seemed to be very familiar. Yes, he seemed to have been in the same situation when he took the offline exam. Later, he even borrowed the soul magnetization inside to scare away a true god. A true god. Luo Nan's mind anchored itself to reality when he thought of this person. He thought about the reason why he had entered this marvelous state. Originally, he just wanted to find the theoretical proof that the Pope and the true God had their eyes on the fantasy breed. How did he build a palace out of thin air? Well, this sort of thing was really more interesting. Luo Nan could only convince himself in this way. Then he confidently focused his attention on the misty palace. The blurry sculptures were fine for him, but the shadow cockroach and the magneto-optical mica jellyfish were so clear that they seemed to be able to be touched. Then he could wake them up at any time. Luo Nan really did touch them. His target was the shadow cockroach. Luo Nan felt rather subtle after his telepathic contact. Of course, the shadow cockroach did not wake up. Luo Nan did not make contact with the material. He just had an additional understanding that pointed towards the configuration, and even a deeper level. Unfortunately, it was not to the extent of being able to reproduce it. This was all just a projection of information on the mental plane. If he could create it out of thin air, wouldn't he become a master of creation? There was a transparent membrane between the transparency of ideas and the reality of matter. It could not be pierced no matter what. It was absolutely not a thin layer. It was a dimension that made one despair. Did Luo Nan despair? Not to that extent. He had no intention of peeking into the domain of the master of creation. He just had some thoughts. If he could pierce through this membrane, at least a bit of it would permeate through temporarily, allowing reason and reality to fuse into one. Only then could he be considered to have understood the work of the master of deep harmony. Looking at it rationally, it was impossible for Luo Nan to do this in a short amount of time. However, this direction and train of thought could be used. He even had ready-made tools that he could use. From the looks of things, the lamination interference technique was simply the beggar version of this high-end direction. TSK, Lianglu o Lianglu. What should I say about you? Let's first simulate it and see how your results are. Which statue to start with? As Luo Nan was mulling over this, the external neuron transmitted a signal that did not harmonize with the misty palace environment. It was a distant communication. This time, Luo Nan had no choice but to withdraw. He returned to the plane of reality, and Zhang Yingying transmitted a visual communication. Half of her pretty face was displayed, as well as the neatly stacked ice granules on a tray. Boss Luo, we're done here. Can you check and accept it? Luo Nan looked at his watch. Not even 2 hours had passed, and the old hands probably hadn't even finished making the mold. Not even Luo Nan could say anything about this efficiency. However, Luo Nan already had a plan for the follow-up. I sent you the assembly blueprints before. You can first assemble it according to them. Okay. Wait a moment. I'll change a few strokes first. Zhang Yingying nearly reached out and strangled Daddy Luo Nan, who wanted to change the plan before he could even accept it. Did he think that Her Majesty Empress Wu had outsourced the syncopation apparatus to him? Fortunately, Her Majesty Empress Wu went back to read and drink tea after she finished her work. Fortunately, Luo Nan had said to change a few strokes. It really didn't take too long. Very soon, the assembly blueprint was sent over again. Although Zhang Yingying curled her lips and gritted her teeth, in the end, she still worked obediently. Actually, she felt pretty good. Just as she said before, this was the first time she understood Luo Nan's train of thought. This meant that she had improved. Student Luo Nan had improved as well. It was no longer the murmur of an idiot, no longer an inhuman whisper. It had returned to a relatively clear logic, but it had a higher level of inner meaning. At least, that was how Zhang Yingying understood it. Luo Nan's visual communications were always on. He directed Zhang Yingying's assembly progress from a distance. Don't just use your hands. Follow up with your soul strength. Do you know telekinesis? Aren't you afraid of interference? There's still room for collaboration. Theoretically, it shouldn't be a problem for us to go in together. Hatue. Spatial structure is the most important thing. It's good to have that shape and precision, but it's fine if you don't. Stop. What happened? Maintain this state. And then? What's next? The sparkling and translucent ice granule structure suddenly stretched and deformed before Zhang Yingying's eyes. It was like a flying ant suddenly flapping its wings to float in the air. It even let out a buzzing sound. Hey, the frequency is too fast. Before Luo Nan's voice could fall, at least half of the ice syncopation apparatus exploded in midair. They transformed into a thin layer of water vapor and ice shards that assaulted Luo Nan's face. Zhang Yingying instinctively squinted her eyes. Her mouth cried out, "Oh no!" But when she focused her eyes to look again, a faint yet lifelike human silhouette appeared behind the water vapor. Chapter 947. You're here already? Zhang Yingying was a bit surprised. How complicated can it be? This is just a signal receiver. The power on my side is a bit higher. This side is a bit more sensitive. After connecting, I just need to make a kite string and connect them together. Luo Nan casually explained the basic principles. Actually, he had used this move a few months ago. Back then, he used the interference waves of the external neuron to transmit to Spring City. This time, he used the classic design of the Heavenly Yuan Empire to realize the long-distance projection, interference, and switching of mental psychic waves and electromagnetic waves. Kite flying. Zhang Yingying reluctantly accepted this explanation. But she had seen the water vapor avatar from before. Isn't it too rough? It's a bit worse than last time. Let's first solve the problem of having and not having. Then what do we do next? Accumulate advantages. Increase precision. Keep polishing. That's it. Luo Nan's blurry avatar lowered its head. It looked at the exploding ice shards and the disappearing water vapor. It felt a bit pained. I was a bit impatient just now. I used too much force. This syncopator is a bit brittle, but it's easy to use. What a pity. In the end, Luo Nan wasn't too familiar with this kite-flying method. From Zhang Yingying's point of view, Luo Nan's methods were already quite astonishing. A distance of several thousand kilometers, and a high-speed moving target was coming as he wished. Even if there were a few prerequisites, it was no different from the legendary void shift. Using this method, the phenomenon of overloading was normal. She took the initiative to say, "I'll ask the boss to make some more for you." No need, no need. Luo Nan wasn't really floating. He was very clear about his own identity. I left 100 behind. Changing forms is more or less enough. Also, I want to learn Her Majesty's technique, and see if I can do it myself. How else can you change? Zhang Yingying was just speaking without thinking. She didn't really care. She still wanted to provide Luo Nan with good conditions. Do you want me to find you a quiet place? No need. I've already found a good place. Ha. Luo Nan's blurry and weak outline of water vapor extended his arm and pointed at a sealed cabin wall. That's the engine room. Outside. Outside? The humidity of the air above the Pacific Ocean is quite ideal. Cloudy weather is the best. Luo Nan didn't wait for Zhang Yingying to react before asking. Approximately when will we arrive? Zhang Yingying asked. Where? D-City, of course. If it wasn't for you, we would have arrived long ago. If we turn around and speed up now, how about another hour and a half? That's fine. Luo Nan suddenly realized that Zhang Yingying's words were a bit strange. Where else could it be if not D-City? Zhang Yingying rolled her eyes at him. Look at the invitation, Luo Yuan. Why? Was the auction going to be held in T-City? It was just a transit station. Actually, compared to D-City, our current location is much closer to our final destination. Then where is this? Nowhere, but less than 1,000 kilometers to the east is the Koror base. It's a satellite town of T-City, and one of the most important hunting outposts in the Pacific Ocean. You mean? Let me tell you something. The Jadeite Light's last stop was to get supplies there. It will leave this afternoon and head northeast. It won't stop along the way. It will take around 30 hours to travel 2,000 kilometers before it arrives at the auction's location. Luonan recalled the world map he had learned before. He also recalled his experience of playing hide and seek with people in the Pacific Ocean a few months ago. He was able to determine the approximate location of the jadeite light. The boundaries between the limited space of perception and the limitless space of imagination were blurred through complex thinking. This was originally the most common situation, but ever since the soul cloak covered the entire world, it had been a long time since he had thought about the extension of space on the scale of Earth. But when he drew the psychic diagram, he would engage in a similar thinking game. He couldn't be partial to either. Once the future was placed on the scale of interstellar space, would he still need to rely on the soul cloak to traverse the vast distance measured in light years? Luonan hadn't found anything similar to the soul cloak within the huge amount of information he had come into contact with. However, there were pearls and jades in the past that utilized the power of perception and imagination to carry out ingenious operations in the field of space and time. The magnetic mica jellyfish was one of them. Luonan subconsciously retracted his hand and caressed the blurry vapor clone. "Hey, what are you doing?" "What can I do?" Luonan rolled his eyes, but Zhang Yingying couldn't see it. He simply asked, "We'll reach T-City in an hour and a half. Where's the landing spot?" "Boss bought a private estate there." "Huh? Is it far from the city? Where's the specific location?" "What do you mean? Time is tight. I made some things in T-City before, like the syncopator and the like. I want to ask someone to deliver them over." "TSK, you're well prepared. Not bad. You should have told me earlier. Boss has a processing plant in T-City. We'll help you make it." Zhang Yingying suddenly realized something as she spoke. The blood flame order. "Speaking of which, how did you guys hook up? Didn't they collude with Bamboo Pole's old lover, Sun Jiai, to secretly make a move against you? I remember you asking about this. But you didn't reply." The main thing is that it's too complicated." Luonan found it hard to use simple, easy-to-understand words to explain this process. Zhang Yingying curled her lips. "I understand. I don't pry into other people's privacy, but you can't go wrong being careful of the Black Widow." "Huh." Luonan's mind spun in a circle before he realized that Zhang Yingying was referring to Mrs. Halder. Zhang Yingying reached out her hand. She carried curiosity and a reminder as she stroked Luonan's half-incorporeal neck. She had a smile that wasn't a smile. "She's a beautiful witch." "Yes, but she's also a ruthless person who could bite off her husband's head." "You don't need me to remind you of this, right?" Luonan thought of Mrs. Halder's various actions over the past few months, and sighed from the bottom of his heart. "Yes, I've seen her." "See your ass." "Rip." Zhang Yingying turned her hand and sliced across Luonan's neck. Unfortunately, it was still lacking in texture, so she didn't continue to dwell on this issue and waste Luonan's time. "The blood flame orders express delivery, right? I'll talk to the estate and have them come directly." "Many thanks. Many thanks. Also, Your Majesty, help me say thank you. It's not good for me to meet people in my current state. Wait for me to dress up a bit." Luonan's figure vanished with a roll of watery light as he spoke. "Lian. A child that lacks love." Luonan was no longer here, but Zhang Yingying was still very cautious. She didn't say that sensitive word. Even Luonan himself might not care. This was the most basic form of respect for a friend. Then Zhang Yingying walked out of the gym. She followed the corridor outside and headed toward Her Majesty Empress Wu's study. She didn't forget to contact the person in charge of the estate in T-City on the way there. She told them about the express delivery. She tilted her head after finishing the call. There was no moon tonight. The sky above the clouds of the Pacific Ocean was dense with stars. The dusky light passed through the one-sided transparent porthole, revealing to her the abundant flow of water vapor and clouds above the ocean. She was limited by her field of vision, but only a small portion of it was visible. However, Zhang Yingying had a feeling that Luonan was here purely based on her intuition. Then she saw a cloud of mist directly in front of her line of sight. It inexplicably had a clear boundary. The mist within the mist rolled and piled up. It was as if an invisible hand was patting and patting. Soon a meaningful shape was formed. It was a smiling face shivering in the fierce winds high up in the sky. Zhang Yingying burst out in laughter. Then she stuck out her middle finger at the large face. The mist suddenly dispersed in all directions. There were no longer any traces of human activity. Her Majesty Empress Wu's airship docked with T-City's Air Traffic Control Department at around 2 o'clock in Xia City. She slowly landed in a private estate in the southern part of the city that faced the sea. The airship's engine continued to churn the air. Several well-dressed people in suits and leather shoes impatiently leaned over. They waited with their heads held high toward the newly opened cabin door. Her Majesty Empress Wu appeared at the cabin door approximately 2 minutes later. She was still wearing a long linen dress that was commonly seen in late spring and early summer. It was a perfect match for T-City's warm climate throughout the 4 seasons. She didn't wear any socks. She wore flip-flop flats as she walked down. At first glance, it looked like she had come for a summer vacation. She held a book in her hand. She flipped it open to a certain page and rolled it in her hand. Her eyelids seemed to droop, but they weren't. Her expression was leisurely and dull. She didn't feel like paying any attention to the people waiting below the ramp. It looked like she could lift the book to her eyes at any moment and enter her own world of reading. Her Majesty Empress Wu had this sort of attitude, but the people below the ramp didn't dare to treat her lightly. They all quickly came forward to welcome her. But when they actually came close, none of them dared to extend their hands. They just bowed in respect and said a few words like, "Your Majesty, it must have been hard for you to come from afar." Her Majesty Empress Wu grunted. Even the people who came forward to welcome her thought that she would directly walk over. They absolutely didn't expect that she would actually stop at the side of the ramp. "Your Majesty?" The person at the very front of the people who came to welcome her was stunned. He thought that Empress Wu had some sort of command, so he moved forward a bit. But then he saw Her Majesty Empress Wu turn her head and look up the ramp. "Hurry, hurry, hurry. The boss has already gone down." Zhang Yingying, who had already changed into casual clothes, flashed out. She strode out with her long legs and descended 4 or 5 steps down the ramp with 2 steps. Then she turned around halfway. "Hey, you weren't this slow in the past. You made the boss wait for you?" I'm coming. I wasn't like this before either." A sigh rang out. Not everyone could clearly hear what was being said, but they could confirm that it was a man. Soon, the slim figure of a young man appeared above the ramp. His attire was very ordinary. He was like a middle school student that could be seen everywhere on the streets of T-City. He didn't seem too familiar with this sort of scene. He gazed into the distance and saw the deep curtain of night in T-City. He was a bit stunned. "What time is it?" T-City time is around 2 o'clock in the morning. We're currently implementing winter time, so there's a 4-hour time difference with Xia City. "What date?" "Of course it's the 15th. Right, let me remind you. The High Seas auction is on the 16th at 8 o'clock in the evening. Geographically, it's already east of the 180th parallel, but it's a pity that it hasn't crossed the sun line. It's the same as T-City in the 12th Eastern District. Time is tight." Chapter 948. It really was urgent. Luo Nan retracted his gaze. Only then did he see the figure on the tarmac. He locked gazes with Her Majesty Empress Wu. He didn't see Her Majesty Empress Wu again on the way here. He couldn't help but guess. Did she have something to say? He walked down the ramp and arrived beside Her Majesty Empress Wu. Zhang Yingying didn't need to say anything. She helped introduce the important figures among the welcoming staff. "This is Boss's investment manager in T-City, Mr. Barty." The leader of the group of people who came to receive Luo Nan was fat and strong. The top of his head was shiny, but there was no hair. However, he had a lush full beard. He was neatly groomed, and his facial features were large. He wasn't handsome, but he felt like a very powerful figure. Her Majesty Empress Wu pointed at this person. "Find him if you have any problems in T-City and its surroundings. I allow him to have a deficit of over 20 million every year. This is for him to be effective at times like this." Her Majesty Empress Wu didn't care about the reactions of the others. She walked forward. There was a golf cart waiting for her up ahead. Zhang Yingying thought for a bit. She winked at Luo Nan and followed Her Majesty Empress Wu down. Everyone naturally followed Her Majesty Empress Wu as soon as she left. Her Majesty Empress Wu and Zhang Yingying sat in the first car. Barty and Luo Nan fell into the second group. The car started to move forward. Barty wasn't too embarrassed. He revealed a smile to Luo Nan, revealing his snow-white teeth. The deficit is just an occasional phenomenon. I'm actually more proficient in long-term investments. In the foreseeable future, I can obtain generous returns. It is a great honor to meet you, Mr. Luo Nan. Your arrival has caused the elite traders of T-City to be jubilant. Many people want to gamble on the confidence of the market in the next 3 days to a week. Of course, there are also some people like me. They want to gamble on the future of this city, and even this world. There is no need to doubt that you are this kind of person. You give us opportunities. Luo Nan looked at him. It sounds like I'm rolling dice on the gambling table. Barty laughed heartily. With your weight, no one would be able to move you, and no one would know when to stop. For people like us who are careless, we must find joy in suffering before we are crushed. So Luo Nan knew that this Mr. Barty was a very arrogant person. He displayed a bit of excessive frankness when facing a character whose strength and status were above his. In other words, he had some opinions about Luo Nan. Luo Nan had no intention of having a deep conversation with him. Just at this time, lights pierced through the darkness. Luo Nan looked against the headlights, and he could faintly see a flying car going up the winding mountain road of the estate. Meng Chong, the head of security for the Castle Financial Group, said he came under your orders. Oh, that's right. Meng Chong had already entered the range of Luo Nan's senses as they spoke. Barty said, the conditions of the manor's reception room aren't bad. There's no need. Just wait here for him. They just so happened to pass a fork in the road. Her Majesty Empress Wu's car turned toward a certain building complex above. Luo Nan let the driver stop the car at the intersection. As long as Meng Chong walked along the road, he would definitely meet him here. Barty looked at his watch. That supervisor Meng would need around 1 minute to go around this winding road. This is just the beginning. Luo Nan felt that this bald-bearded man was a bit talkative, so he didn't say anything. He just shot a glance at Barty. Barty's smile seeped out from his thick beard. Perhaps it was because of this that there seemed to be a lot more to it. From now until the start of the High Seas auction, there will be 42 hours in between. Right now, there are over 60 extraordinaries who have been confirmed to participate in the Round Table Conference. Forgive me for speaking bluntly, but you need to do some homework in order to obtain the support of over half of them. Luo Nan still didn't speak, but his eyebrows jumped up slightly. He heard Barty say, "You've been working in T-City for many years, managing this estate. Not only do you have professional service personnel, facilities, and a few channels. Mr. Luo Nan, there are some people who wish to speak with you." Some people? Luo Nan looked at another fork in the road. The car carrying Her Majesty Empress Wu had already disappeared into the night. Was this Her Majesty Empress Wu's intention? Luo Nan was silent for a few seconds. The scene of his conversation with Her Majesty Empress Wu rushed through his mind like flowing water. Then he came to a conclusion. Impossible. Her Majesty Empress Wu had clearly pointed out that Luo Nan was seriously lagging behind in his studies as a sociopath. The implication was that she didn't expect Luo Nan to be of any use in this field. Luo Nan had asked Her Majesty Empress Wu for help in making up for this shortcoming. The two sides had already discussed the conditions, even if the terms were a bit cloudy and misty. Luo Nan's gaze turned to Barty, and he determined the nature of this person. This was a broker, a very powerful broker. Her Majesty Empress Wu clearly knew this. Her general meaning was that this person would be useful, but she certainly wouldn't be following this fellow's footsteps. As for how to use this person, Luo Nan thought as he slowly shook his head. I lack confidence in my eloquence. In addition, I can't arrange my time. Barty laughed very brightly. Mr. Luo Nan, the role of professionals is to help guests like you, to make more efficient use of their time and various resources. Really? Time for experiments can be divided? This is a very unique schedule. Barty was clearly stunned for a moment, but he soon revealed a smile. But there's always a way. The illumination light streaked over, sweeping across Barty's face. Luonan's face was probably the same. Meng Chong arrived. The golf cart stopped at a fork in the road, and someone got out from the driver's seat. It was Meng Chong. He wore a leather jacket and jeans. His appearance was neat and tidy, and the first impression he gave others was that he was swift and fierce. He was quite in line with his status as a powerful fleshly expert. Luonan got off the golf cart as well. He was no stranger to Meng Chong. Even though he didn't know much about Meng Chong before, he had spent half a year fiddling with the Blood Soul Temple from time to time. He had observed and even guided the daily operation of the Abyssal Region's solidified configuration. In Luonan's eyes, Meng Chong was like a sealed furnace. The outside was already scalding, but the inside was hiding an even more fatal heat. It was a high temperature that could melt metal. Meng Chong was a dangerous person worth paying attention to. Of course, Meng Chong's feelings were different. Meng Chong's face was expressionless right now. He bowed to Luonan, but he didn't say anything. He was different from Mrs. Halder and Yin Le. This was the first time he met Luonan and the faintly discernible Mr. Mo. He had yet to find a suitable way to interact with them. But in the end, he had to speak. After pausing for 2 seconds, he still chose to address her in the same manner as Yin Le. Sir, the 4 base numbers for each of the 2 types are ready. Meng Chong skipped the pleasantries and went straight to the point. When he saw an outsider like Barty, he hid the word syncopator and showed his cautious and experienced side. He turned to the back of the car as he spoke. Luonan walked over, and Barty followed behind him as if nothing had happened. Luonan ignored Meng Chong. Nan did not respond, nor did he say anything. He opened the trunk, and there were 2 boxes side by side, one big and one small. Meng Chong opened the smaller one. Inside were 4 cylinders the size of an ordinary pen holder. 2 of them were made of wood, while the other 2 were made of metal. Luonan didn't need to open them to look. He just needed to sweep his soul strength to know that all 4 cylinders contained centometers. It was just that the wooden cylinders were made from mutant skeletons, and the metal cylinders were made from some sort of special memory alloy. There are 200 in each cylinder. The number Meng Chong reported was quite a bit more than the base number Luonan needed. But this was normal. After all, there were no quality inspection standards. There was always a question of quality. Luonan opened one of the metal cylinders and poured out all the alloy granules within. He dangerously placed them on his palm, and then he carefully closed them. He rubbed them between his palm and fingers, emitting a slight sound. In the span of a breath, these little toys the size of rice grains seemed to come alive. Their bodies swelled, transforming into an insect-like form. There were even wing-shaped flakes on their sides that vibrated. They passed through the gaps between Luonan's fingers and returned to the cylinder. They collided with the walls of the cylinder and made rustling sounds. This continued in succession for half a minute, before they could be considered to have returned to their nest. But there was a considerable portion, around 50 or so, that simply slipped through the gaps between Luonan's fingers and fell all over the ground. These were the ones that Luonan didn't have much success with in his transformation and control. They were eliminated by Luonan. The margin he left behind really did show its use. Barty and Meng Chong's gazes overcame the darkness of the night to sweep a few glances over the dark ground. The only difference was that Barty didn't make any follow-up movements. Meng Chong immediately bent down and picked up a few of the granules from the ground. He placed them in his palm, took a photo, and prepared to send it back to the processing plant for future reference and improvement. Luonan ignored the actions of the 2. He picked up another cylinder and did the same thing. He tested every cylinder and eliminated 50 to 60 granules from each cylinder. One of the cylinders didn't even have enough bone materials to form a base number. The quality of quality wasn't ideal. Compared to the Martial Emperor Sakamoto, which was still embedded in the vapor clone, the difference was quite obvious. Meng Chong could only admit his mistake when he saw this. Sir, I'm sorry. It's nothing. It's to be expected. The difference between Earth's materials and the Heavenly Yuan empires was obvious. Plus, the standard version of the Heavenly Yuan Empire had a built-in microchip for every syncopator. It could be adjusted intelligently, reducing the burden of control by quite a bit. Luonan didn't have this condition on Earth. There were bound to be many redundant operations that exceeded the standards of the drill manual. The difficulty increased, and the requirements for the syncopator's strength and sensitivity increased. With so many restrictions, it was fine as long as it could be used. Even Her Majesty Martial Emperor's refined version had the problem of relative fragility. Luonan was quite open-minded. He tidied up the syncopator and turned his gaze to the large box to the side. He was a bit uncertain. This is... Deputy Ablatum Een once requested the order to collect information and resources related to the Deep Blue Walkers. Meng Chong opened the large box, revealing the silver-white components inside. This is a military experimental machine. According to the military, it's between version 3 and 4. It was transferred through internal connections and went through the proper procedures. Currently, it's attached to the security department of the Castle Financial Group. It can connect to the private network, but there's a limit to its access. We thought that you might be able to use it in the near future, so we brought it over. Chapter 949. Thank you. Luonan did not instruct Een Lu to do this. It was completely her autonomous judgment. It was quite on point. Though Luonan's water vapor avatar was no longer needed, the complicated situation that followed was that Luonan's main body could come over at any time. It was always good to have more resources to support him. Oh, you don't need it now? Not necessarily. Luonan extended his hand and streaked across the ice-cold metal component. There was a clear difference between the perceptual levels of his water vapor avatar and his fleshly body. This gave him a different kind of feeling, so much so that he had some inspiration in his mind. He fell silent. He placed his fingertips on the component and gently stroked it. After a while, his gaze shifted to Meng Chong. The latter maintained a respectful and somewhat distant posture as he continued. Also, Deputy Ritual Master Een has also sent over the design of the 4th version of the exoskeleton frame. It is currently being pushed forward, and the assembly experiment will be conducted before 8 in the morning. Sir, you can come to the processing plant for on-site guidance. Excellent. Luonan's words were a bit casual. The exoskeleton frame was also used to build a perfect body for his main body, so it wasn't used for the time being. It could only be said that Een Lu had indeed thought things through and made preparations. But right now, Luonan's train of thought had already slanted in another direction. He asked Meng Chong. The beach where Lady Halder usually trains. Meng Chong displayed clear astonishment. Clearly, he didn't understand how Luonan, who had just arrived in T-City, could understand Mrs. Halder's daily routine so well. But he still responded quickly. That's an unnamed private beach. We call it Zeolite. It's less than 20 kilometers away from here. Ancient Castle Financial Group's Aber Manor? Barty suddenly interrupted. If the weather is clear from the highest castle here, which is where Her Majesty Empress Wu is currently staying, you can actually see the cliff of the orchard where your manor is located from a distance. The Zeolite beach should be on the other side of the cliff. We can already be considered neighbors. Meng Chong glanced at him but did not reply. Luonan's interest was piqued. Really? He really had to go and take a look. How about this? Tell Her Majesty Empress Wu that I'm going to Aber's Manor to conduct an experiment. If there's anything, she can contact me at any time. Ha! When Barty heard the word experiment again, he needed another 2 seconds to digest it. Just as he was thinking, Luo Binghe suddenly realized something. Nen had already turned to the side of the car. She pulled open the door of Meng Chong's car and sat down without hesitation. Meng Chong was also stunned. As the head of security for many years, he naturally knew what to do next. However, his meticulous thinking made him hesitate. His gaze swept across the floor once more, and Barty's eyes turned to look at him at the same time. Their gazes even met for a brief moment. Up ahead, Luonan had already pressed down the window. Let's go. Hurry up. Meng Chong immediately got rid of his other thoughts and roughly packed up. He closed the trunk, quickly got into the car and entered the driver's seat. A second later, the engine started. Luonan spoke to Barty amidst the muffled rumble. Here. Tidy things up. Barty answered quickly, of course. I mean, you still have a mission. Luonan spread open his palm. 7 or 8 metal or bone granules appeared on his palm. These were the granules he had intercepted before. This little thing is called a syncopator. You saw it just now. Its success rate isn't ideal. I thought that maybe the Castle Consortium's main business was in the field of sports equipment, and they weren't good at processing in this area. So, Luonan extended his hand out the window as he spoke. Barty subconsciously extended his hand, and Luonan very naturally poured the granules into Barty's hand. Ying has the blueprints. Come over and ask about it. You mean? The higher the precision of the assembly, the better. Do your best to pile up the required materials. Even so, this little thing shouldn't cost 20 million. I'm just joking. The main thing is that I can't always have Her Majesty Empress Wu do the work for me, right? Barty was stunned once more. But soon the large mouth between his whiskers cracked open. Of course, Mr. Luonan. I understand. I wish you success in your experiments. Thank you. Luonan responded politely. Then he closed the window and started the flying car. With a neat turn, he bypassed Barty and avoided the area with the most defective syncopators on the ground. He sped down the mountain. Barty stood in place, watching the car go far away. Only when the taillights of the car were submerged in the darkness did he withdraw his gaze. He looked at the little things scattered on the ground. Over 100 failed syncopators were scattered across an area of a dozen or so square meters. Even if Meng Chang's driving skills were excellent, it was hard to avoid being run over by a few. It appeared to be particularly messy. Barty's stout body slowly bent down. He extended his hand and accurately picked up 5 or 6 metal and bone granules on the ground. He copied Luonan and rubbed them for a bit. Nothing happened. It made sense when he thought about how these were defective products. He raised one of the granules in front of his eyes and used the illumination function of his wristband to shine a strong light on it. He observed it seriously, looking pensive. After a while, he called out to the driver of the golf cart. Pick them all up. 262. Don't miss a single one. Barty didn't care what the driver's reaction was. He dialed a number and said, "Clear out a material analysis laboratory." Also, ask the Coastal Defense Department for a deep blue platform experimental machine. It should be between the 3rd and 4th edition. A call came in while Barty was still giving out orders. He glanced at the caller ID. It was labeled with the nickname Red Eye Yen. Barty ignored it and continued to order. Also, those professionals who call themselves configuration experts. It's time for them to show their value. The number in the middle called again. Barty was very patient. He arranged the tasks of analyzing the syncopators in every detail. Then he organized his thoughts and confirmed that he didn't miss anything. Only then did he select the number and call back. Director Yen. Barty had just started when the words that had been bottled up for several minutes gushed out. What the hell is that little bastard of the Luo family up to? Barty stroked his neatly trimmed beard. He came. He left. He arranged tasks. He increased my work. That's it. He arranged for you. Her Majesty Empress Wu introduced me to him in a grand manner. Clearly, she wants my ability to match this grand. So I prepared a few meetings and a few messages. But Mr. Luo doesn't seem to be interested in any of this. Perhaps I should have made it clear earlier. This includes you. Don't beat around the bush, Barty. We found you and paid you. We want to receive the reward we deserve. Yes, this is in line with the spirit of the contract. But for the sake of fairness, before the transaction, there should be a valuation, right? Barty looked at his watch. It's 2:17 in the morning now. In another 6 hours, we can talk about the next step of the transaction. Of course, if you can't wait, you can come to the Bitter Reef Laboratory earlier. I'll be there. Remember to bring your professionals, in every sense of the word. Chapter 950. Early in the morning, the wind blowing from inland in D-City brought the chill of late autumn. However, due to the heat island effect, the wind lost its power when it entered the inner city. Barty's stout body was spread out, occupying nearly 1/3 of the interior space of the luxury commercial vehicle. He unbuttoned his suit and let his chest and abdomen vibrate to their heart's content under unrestrained conditions, emitting an abundant resonance sound. It was an hour's drive from the manor at the edge of the city to the heart of the city, and the phone call was almost nonstop. Even Barty he purposely compressed every communication to 5 minutes, but there was still very little free time. And in almost every communication, the key content of the conversation could not be separated from 2 points. Luo Nan and the little plaything that Luo Nan released. As the most authoritative source of information in T-City, the news that Barty released successfully caused a series of echoes. This was the embodiment of his value. Of course, this meant that Luo Nan was still the hot topic of the entire circle from a deeper level of significance. Various parties expressed their attitudes towards him and the information they sent out. They would all have rather sensitive and extreme reactions. He's rolling around in the oil pan. Be careful not to get oil on him. In the most recent call, the tone of the other side was like freshly squeezed lemon juice, or some kind of ancient Eastern seasoning. Unfortunately, I'm not used to Chinese cuisine, let alone a chef. That's right, but you're an ingredient supplier, the kind that hoards for profit. I can take it as a compliment. We're almost there, just a moment. As they spoke, the car stopped in front of a gate formed by a group of low-rise buildings. After a simple identity verification, the gate opened, and the car continued to move forward. Barty's identification bracelet automatically connected to the factory's built-in artificial intelligence. Bitter Reef sends its love, Mr. Barty. You have an appointment from Mr. Yin Yongbua of the Apocalypse Laboratory. He has arrived early. Oh, I see. The car drove directly into the underground laboratory area. The administrative head of the laboratory, Morrison, was already waiting at the entrance. He put on a warm smile to greet his big benefactor. Mr. Barty, welcome to the laboratory. Barty reached out and shook Morrison's hand. I hope there are valuable results waiting for me. The laboratory has made some preliminary conclusions. Judgment. Although Barty was plump, he walked like the wind. In just a few steps, he had left Morrison in the dust, forcing the middle-aged successful man in a white coat to jog to catch up. However, Barty could no longer be bothered with him. He passed through a few security checkpoints with ease, and soon arrived at the core area of the Bitter Reef Laboratory. Barty entered the observation room, and Yin Yongbua was already waiting there. This important member of the Apocalypse Lab, who could still be considered young, was currently circulating his supernatural powers. As a result, his pupils were red, and the veins around his eyes, especially around his temples, bulged like a dense web. They were also clearly twitching, and it was a daunting sight. The look in his eyes was fierce and cold. As a result, Morrison hesitated outside the observation room and didn't dare to enter. Barty did not mind. He walked up and greeted Yin Yongbua by his secular name. I'm sorry, there was a traffic jam on the road. Lately, T-City has been bustling with activity again. Director Yin, are you satisfied with the laboratory environment? If we exclude the human factor, it's okay. Barty laughed heartily and then said, the professionals you brought can fill in the gaps. Everyone in the relevant field is a self-righteous blind person, except for Instructor Li Wei. Barty did not refute this argument. He just asked, then what about Luo Nan? Yin Yongbua did not answer this question. He just shot a cold glance at Barty before turning his head to watch the progress of the experiment. Barty knew himself very well. He was not a self-righteous person, but he was certainly a blind person in the relevant field. Therefore, he just observed and listened to the temporary conclusions of those who dared to speak. Even so, debate was unavoidable. Omitting and replacing the professional terms, the meaning was, professional A. The structure is simple. It doesn't possess any direct lethality. The design is homogeneous, and the composition of the entity is very poor. But in the mental field, especially the configuration field that he has been advocating, it should be possible to construct a relatively rich virtual component. Therefore, this is a type of material component. Professional B. No, this should be some kind of distributed architecture. It is very suitable for the implantation of elementary intelligence. If the underlying links are strengthened, a simple command can form a large number of varied forms. From this point of view, It is more like some kind of mimetic ecological model. It is the embodiment of bionic intelligence technology. Where's the intelligence? Where's the chip? In your fantasies? There's clearly a space reserved. Did you guys feed the results of your structural disassembly and restoration to the dogs? Professional C tried to smooth things over. It's completely possible to have both. Through bionic technology, a certain structure can be realized, and then soul strength can be used to control it. Shut up, loser who failed the experiment. Everyone in the observation room, aside from Barty, had ugly expressions on their faces as they watched the professionals in the laboratory bicker. Morrison, in particular, was already considering leaving the room. It was at this time that Barty asked him, "Dr. Morrison, you're also a professional. What's your opinion?" "I'm just the person in charge of the administration," Morrison wailed in his heart. But no matter what, he was still a former expert in the study of mutant species. Even though he had retired from the front lines for many years, he still had the basics. Perhaps it's because of the influence of my professional direction. Of course, it's also because of your description of the situation, Mr. Barty. I'm more inclined towards BS opinion. In fact, the laboratory has already searched for social species as a control group. Bees and ants are all possibilities. In the mutant species, Barty asked before Morrison could finish speaking. What can Luonan do with it? What can we do with it? Can we find a docking point? Morrison was really sweating. It was not impossible for him to forcefully explain and speculate, but at this extremely pragmatic level, he had to take responsibility for every word he said. Sweat dripped down from his forehead, and he subconsciously grabbed the handkerchief in his pocket. He wanted to take it out to wipe his sweat, but he knew that it was inappropriate. He froze there for a time, feeling extremely awkward. Barty didn't waste any time on this person. He turned to Yin Yongbua and said, "There must be a purpose for him to find an unreliable supervisor like me and let the news out. Clearly, if you want to talk to him, you need to understand the value of this. You need to be willing to bite the bait. There should be a certain threshold, but it shouldn't be impossible for everyone to understand." "What are you trying to say?" Yin Yongbua's eyebrows were wrinkled to the point of his temples. He really didn't like being tested by others, especially by Luonan. Barty's smile was still extremely obvious under his thick beard. This is a screening question. Luonan, or perhaps the people behind him, are currently screening allies. In matters related to the development of a new plane, they are continuously leaking information for this. I understand it like this. Mr. Mo revealed the mush-mouth ape to solve the problem of having and not having. Luonan took out this little thing to show that he has something. Or perhaps it could be said that he is willing to take it out and share it. From the looks of it, they're still reserved, but it's a qualified negotiating attitude. Negotiating? The corner of Yin Yongbua's mouth twitched. Follow his pace. The fish will eat whatever he takes? Barty indicated for him to calm down. I know that you guys are impatient. Back then, you wanted to eat Luo Yuandao clean in one bite. But in the end, you guys might have missed out on the most valuable part. Now you're using the same method on his grandson. But this isn't the wilderness era. Luonan isn't that crazy old man. He has the qualifications to negotiate. I believe so. Yin Yongbua was silent. He immediately turned his face to the side, not letting Barty see his current expression. Barty acted as if he didn't see the blurry reflections on the surrounding glass. He continued, "That little fangirl of the martial emperor has already used this to contact Xia City. Perhaps we can wait a bit longer." Xia City. Yin Yongbua muttered to himself, but his thoughts clearly couldn't keep up. Barty decided to end the topic. Xia City won't miss out on this. After all, everyone is an independent individual. Everyone has their own demands. Even an ironclad alliance needs to spend time, energy, resources, and other costs to maintain. Do you understand what I mean when I bring out this old argument? Yin Yongbua still didn't look at him. He just turned his face toward the experimental area, recovering his ice-cold and gloomy appearance. Relax. We will strictly fulfill the contract, including the increased value clause. Barty laughed heartily and patted Yin Yongbua on the shoulder. Yin Yongbo responded with indifference, so he didn't see the smile in Barty's eyes. Even if he saw it, he wouldn't care. Yin Yongbo wanted to observe the experimental process for a while longer. Barty didn't stay long and walked out of the laboratory. After getting into his car, the first phone call he made was to Zhang Yingying. The customers have expressed their interest. Now it's up to the manufacturer to set the price. As a distributor, aren't you the best at raising prices? Zhang Yingying had just stepped into the most transparent room in the castle at the top of the mountain. She faced the sunlight that shone in, and did a few stretches. There were huge floor-to-ceiling windows and a viewing platform, as well as a set of binoculars that could help the guests take in the most beautiful scenery of T-City's coastline. Because of this, Zhang Yingying was a little distracted during the call. As she spoke, she turned the binoculars and looked around. A few seconds later, he suddenly said, "Yesterday you said that Luonan went to Zeolite Beach. It's on the northeastern coastline, right? It's foggy. Oh, what I'm saying is, set the price boldly and have confidence in the manufacturer and the product." Zhang Yingying immediately hung up the call. She fiddled with her thoughts, and Luonan's number immediately appeared on her wristband. She began to hesitate whether or not she should contact him. It seemed that they were really conducting an experiment. Her wristband suddenly vibrated, causing her to jump in fright. She looked at the contact and saw that it was actually Luonan. She hastily connected. "Hello?" Luonan's voice came over. "You're spying on me?" Zhang Yingying was so shocked that the hair on her forehead stood up. F***CK. You're spying on me. Chapter 951. Luonan was helpless. I said, "If you don't peek at me, how would you know that I'm peeking?" Cough, remotely observing you. Zhang Yingying didn't wait for Luonan to enter the loop. She spat out a long string of words. "You've been spending a lot of time on your water vapor clone lately. Now you can feel the power of the boss's condensation ring, right? You're thinking about that fortress in the clouds, huh? Hold on, where did you call me from? Xia City? A fortress?" Luonan was stunned on Zeolite Beach. Something happened to the fortress of the Bloodwill Ring in Xia City? LLLW. At Winky Face after the awkwardness caused by their lack of understanding, Luonan was the first to respond. The fortress that Zhang Yingying was referring to should be a structure that he, the Pope, and the true God had temporarily constructed near the intercontinental airship when they fought across space. He had pretty much forgotten about it. The fortress of the Bloodwill Ring in Xia City had a simple wedge-shaped structure that was pieced together to solidify the abyssal region configuration. It had more value for in-depth research. Luonan was able to make a basic judgment after returning from the relay station. The fortress of the Bloodwill Ring was definitely not a design of the era he had entered. Either this was the classical mental configuration of the Heaven Abyss civilization, before the Calamity World, or it was created in a region outside of the light concealment system after that. This involved the background of life and death, poison. But from the perspective of others, Luonan was able to contend against the two extraordinaries of the Amaterasu order. He must have used some sort of incredible secret technique. Zhang Yingying was probably thinking more about it, because she was mixed in with the condensation ring and the water vapor clone. Luonan answered honestly, "What's going on right now is much more complicated than the fortress in the clouds. So I suggest that you look less in this direction to avoid getting hurt." Oh my. The ultimate meaning of the forbidden technique. That's still far from it. My brain capacity is reaching its limit, but the resources I can mobilize are also at their limit. Luonan sighed as he spoke. Part of the reason he was chatting with Zhang Yingying right now was that his mental strength had reached its limit. He needed to adjust it. Zhang Yingying was very concerned. She asked him, "Did you run into trouble with your research? Is it critical? Should I ask the boss for help? The amount of resources that T-City can mobilize is quite considerable." "Resources? Barty's resources?" Zhang Yingying laughed. "That Barty guy definitely doesn't get along with you, but he's really useful. You should know that he's a rare middle-aged talent in the LCRF. LCRF? Isn't he a subordinate of the Martial Monarch? Boss also has a large investment in LCRF." What's wrong with using them as a manager? I remember telling you about this. Yeah, that's right. It's nothing much. This was the reality of contemporary society. Under the broken political map of substantive urban autonomy, only the power of capital could infiltrate every corner in various forms and affect every aspect of society invisibly. Policies, laws, and mainstream public consciousness all served it, were interfered with, and were bound to coexist with it. The extraordinary power of the inner world did have the ability to break this situation, but a considerable number of people, including heroes like Her Majesty Empress Wu, seemed to prefer to use this situation rather than break it. Luo Nan didn't have a particularly clear inclination in his thinking. It was just that he lacked a favorable impression of Quantum Corporation, a large capital spokesperson, due to the influence of his life experience. He didn't go so far as to have any opinions about Her Majesty Empress Wu's investment model. The reason why he was a bit absent-minded was because of the influence of his current research topic. Zhang Yingying didn't delve too deeply into it. She just continued to introduce Barty's situation. However, you need to pay attention. Barty is a rather famous stubborn person in the LCRF. Do you understand what a stubborn person means? I think I do. It was said that the big shots of the Life Cycle Research Fund were mostly people with severe jealousy. They weren't able to catch the tide of the age of distortion, due to various reasons. They had no fate with extraordinary powers. Although they grasped an enormous amount of resources on Earth, their aged and frail bodies weren't enough to support their ambitions and desires. Therefore, they spent large sums of money on life extension, human body modification, artificially constructed extraordinary powers, and other fields. They did this all for the sake of using money to bridge the chasm of life levels and obtain exuberant life force that matched their social status. But their progress in this aspect was still limited so far. The results of the burners and the like clearly couldn't be used on these old and decrepit people. As time passed, the minds of these people inevitably became anxious and warped. One could well imagine how some of these extreme people viewed ability users. However, Barty, he's still in the prime of his life. He's in the late stages of pancreatic cancer. He's like an ordinary person right now because boss intervened and slowed down the course of the disease. Luo Nan drew a cold breath. Hiss. Is this the omnipotent? Zhang Yingying shrugged. No matter what, he picked up a life from boss. Yes, half a life. But his mentality is already different from ordinary people. He's jealous, anxious, thirsty. Boss said that he can disregard everything for the sake of prolonging his life. His will is firm, and he possesses extraordinary forbearance. Luo Nan recalled the short time they spent together last night, and expressed his approval. Amazing. I couldn't tell at all. This kind of person is quite scary. But the treatment of his disease largely relies on boss, so he can be considered reliable on a certain level. This isn't my area of expertise, so if you guys say he's reliable, then he's reliable. Luo Nan decided not to waste his brain on this matter. In any case, his request to Zhang Yingying was just to be a loudspeaker. She had already done it. Zhang Yingying understood. She no longer talked about this topic with Luo Nan. Oh right. I did as you requested. I sent the Syncopator's blueprints back to Xia City. I heard you say that this thing can be used on the Blood Intent Ring's fortress? When did I say that? Oh, it's not impossible. There are some similarities in theory. Zhang Yingying subconsciously shivered when she heard the hidden meaning in Luo Nan's words. Wait a minute. It was too late. A large number of characters, symbols, and diagrams flashed before Luo Nan's eyes. These came from the external neurons database. To be more precise, they came from the data of germination in the inner universe simulator. To be more precise, they came from the fantasy mimicry technique that Lieutenant Go Yi had imparted to him. It was the research and application of the classical fantasy school of the Heavenly Yuan Empire. After Luo Nan returned, he did a rough study. Last night, he did an intensive reading and verification. He had some insights that he needed to share with someone. Zhang Yingying came just in time. Therefore, Luo Nan intentionally or unintentionally skipped over the previous sentence. He opened up the sharing of his academic insights. The syncopator is essentially a kind of bionic mimicry structure. This bionic design relies on a theoretical platform. We can call it the superconfiguration theory. It's not that profound, to put it bluntly. If we roughly interpret it, the research direction is a bit like our system theory. It's the old three theories and the new three theories of the last century. Zhang Yingying, who was unfortunately trapped in a pit, keenly sensed a seemingly superfluous word. In any case, self-organization, synergy, mutation, hierarchical structure, and so on are all part of it. Luonan just pretended not to hear her. He continued to speak. This theory believes that the universal system of the universe exists in a hidden nature of matter. It can only emerge in a specific system environment. From a simple utilitarian point of view, it's the greater part of the whole greater than the sum of its parts. It's the reflection of the ultimate law that makes a system a system. It can be called the superconfiguration. From a realistic point of view, the superconfiguration itself is an eternal goal of exploration. Perhaps there will never be a correct answer. But through imitation and analysis, this ultimate superconfiguration can be reduced and degraded into a kind of fantasy configuration that can be utilized. This fantasy configuration can be used to guide all things to form a specific system. It is a channel that realizes a two-way interference between the mind and matter. Luonan did not explain one point. This so-called fantasy configuration, which was degraded from the so-called superconfiguration, was one of the origins of the school of fantasy in the Heaven Abyss civilization. There was another point that needed to be made clear. The theory of superconfiguration was a large volume in the Heaven Abyss civilization. It was even the king's theory for a long period of time. The research of the school of fantasy was basically covered by this set of theories. This included the school of creation that Luonan knew of. It seemed to be the same. He continued to speak. The syncopator mainly emphasizes three key words on the superconfiguration theory platform. First, hierarchy. Second, structure. Third, leap. As long as one understands a bit of system theory, understanding this shouldn't be difficult. I'll just talk about the concrete division of levels. Fuck you, it's not difficult. Zhang Yingying cursed. But Luonan's clumsy expression skills aside, the contents of what he said were in line with Zhang Yingying's basic knowledge. The depth was moderate. Luonan spoke again. The division mode is still that obsessive-compulsive disorder of 3 stages. What do you mean by still? Luonan did not pause. He continued to speak. The first level is the material level. In other words, the primordial object universe is completely devoid of life and consciousness. It is the bottom and foundation of everything. The second level is the life level. The universe has gone through hundreds of millions and billions of years of evolution. It has formed life substrates, structures, functions, and even instincts, desires, social groups, low and high-level mental modes. Of course, this includes the actual universe that has been influenced and transformed. This is the main and central axis of research. The third level is the fantasy level. It is the advanced derivative and fantasy creation of life and consciousness. In a narrow sense, it is the existence mode and level of supernatural power that can effectively interfere with the actual universe. A bit higher also includes the evolution of the universe after the supernatural interference. This is the direction and goal of research. The 3 levels, from low to high, from disorder to order, from primordial to future, go through a super complex arrangement and combination. This includes the vertical and horizontal arrangement of space and time, as well as the natural and unnatural process of leap in importance. Looking at the big picture, the syncopator is the logical mapping of this sort of hierarchical arrangement and leap. Of course, in reality, it is a kind of simulation tool from the perspective of bionics. It is extremely classic and convenient. What it can simulate completely depends on the user's level of control, as well as the breadth and depth of thought. Zhang Yingying found a cutoff point with great difficulty. Her voice was a bit weak. Can I record this? Chapter 952. Luonan quickly responded. There's no need to remember. This sort of simple theory and hierarchical division is just a basic representation. It's not something important. What's important is the logical reasoning and precise model established upon it. Of course, there's also the corresponding accumulation of technology. Well, this is all the more reason to record. Your words will make a lot of people drool. Zhang Yingying had started recording 10 seconds ago. She was also a bit unwilling to give up. She adjusted the parameters of the telescope, hoping to make a more detailed distinction of the mist on the distant shoreline. However, she obtained nothing even when the atmosphere boiled and fluctuated back and forth. I told you not to look. I'm very sensitive right now. Luo Nan was a bit helpless, but he soon returned to the main topic. Aren't you being too blunt? No. This is for the best. You must know that it's not just the technical personnel who are listening to your words. A bunch of politicians are listening as well. It's impossible to overestimate their stupidity at this time. Okay, then let's return to the fortress of the Ring of Blood Intent. Oh, have you finished debugging the sensor detection module? Luo Nan vaguely remembered that 2 days ago, before he went looking for Her Majesty Empress Wu, he had entered his friend group to ask about it. Someone had mentioned this matter at the time, saying that there was a bug. If it wasn't Papercut, then it was Gao Tianshi. Hehe, Mr. CTO. Do you have the nerve to ask this question? Zhang Yingying sneered twice. Then she suddenly asked, "Oh right, what's the project you're working on?" Isn't it the Fortress of the Ring of Blood Intent? Scavenger. Is that so? Luo Nan had to admit that he was a bit unfamiliar with the Fortress of the Ring of Blood Intent, let alone the Scavenger project. He had been plotting to kill Gongqi for the past few months, but most of his energy was tied up in Ban City. He had nearly forgotten that he was the CTO of Xia City's Scavenger project. With great difficulty, the memory fragments that had settled down stirred up once more. The Scavenger project was a joint research and development project launched by the Xia City branch, the Xia City government, the garrison, and the Eastern Seawar Zone. Nominally, it was to cleanse and purify illegal configurations on the mental plane, and to lower the rate of supernatural murders. In reality, it was a platform for several partners to research, analyze, and absorb the technology of the Ring of Blood Intent. As for the Blood Intent Ring Fortress, it was an additional product that Luo Nan used to demonstrate configuration theory during his first public lecture. Through its unique basic modules and circulation structure, it gathered, organized, and connected the energy information of thousands of ability users, forming an energy structure system anchored on the spiritual plane, pointing directly at the Abyss region. Back then, there were quite a number of people who didn't possess enough extraordinary power to construct a module on the mental plane. They had no choice but to borrow the psychic wave network of Xia City to simulate and relay the operation. During the process, the module structure was named the Ring of Bloodwill by the administrator of the psychic wave network. In fact, this system was known as a fortress in the external neurons database. Therefore, Luo Nan combined the two and called it the Ring of Blood Intent Fortress. Speaking of which, the Blood Intent Ring Fortress was the first time Luo Nan had publicly displayed and disseminated the technological achievements of the Heaven Abyss civilization. The results were astonishing. Not only did he verify the caged state of the mental soul, he overturned the traditional model of the Sea of Consciousness with 3 layers, 1 region, and 1 domain in one fell swoop. He also tore apart the gorgeous outer garments of the profound mysteries of the Abyss region, the solidified configuration of the Abyss region, and revealed it to the world. Quite a few people were left in quite a sorry state. Most of Luo Nan's enormous reputation in the inner world came from this. Because of this, Zhang Yingying felt that Luo Nan's reaction was more and more absurd. But she was already used to it. Okay, even though I'm not part of the Scavenger project team, I can still answer Mr. CTO's question. The current situation isn't bad. It's too bad. You set a direction and then don't care about it. Then you added a tattered external patch, and used it to create some detection and sensing module. That toy is just a half-finished product. Countless follow-up plans have been set, and bugs are emerging endlessly. If you use this toy to be a scavenger, you'll only be swept away. I feel like the government and the military are losing confidence. Luo Nan was a bit shocked. Are they that passive? Actually, it's not that bad. Zhang Yingying suddenly recalled that Luo Nan had a pile of troublesome matters tangled up on his body. It could be said that Luo Nan had too much time to take care of himself. He certainly did not have the energy to divert his attention to other things. She rushed to make up for it. As long as the fortress of the Blood Intent Ring hangs in the Abyss region, it can be used as a stargazing platform and a training room. Those fellows will have to endure no matter what. Luo Nan laughed. They can endure today, but they might not be able to endure tomorrow. Zhang Yingying was dumbfounded. Luo Nan's words couldn't even be considered a metaphor. They were facts placed before her eyes. It was 8 o'clock in the morning on the 15th. There were only 36 hours left until Luo Nan was confirmed to attend the High Seas auction, where many powers would converge. Luo Nan was undoubtedly at a disadvantage when faced with a boundless heart of greed. For him, any bit of support was extremely important. Any bit of wavering tendency was extremely dangerous. But what was the point of making a last-minute effort? When all was said and done, Luo Nan mostly relied on President Ouyang, Her Majesty Empress Wu, and even Secretary He to strive for resources on the real-world level. His own foundation was far from solid enough. This was a fact, and it was impossible to correct it in a short amount of time. Piercing it would only cause chaos in the hearts of people. Zhang Yingying's mind was like the seething atmosphere through a telescope. It fluctuated endlessly. She suddenly regretted bringing up this topic. However, Luo Nan's voice was the same as always. He naturally entered the technical domain. If you look at it from the perspective of a fantasy configuration, then the problem with the scavenger project lies in its empty structure. However, it ignores the elements of level and leap. Of course, the schools of thought are different. It's not very appropriate to forcefully explain it. What school of thought? Zhang Yingying wanted to ask, but she felt that it was too sensitive. She forcefully pushed the question back into her stomach. However, she also somewhat understood the thoughts and feelings of certain people. A vague yet grand silhouette of light and shadow seemed to gradually unfold behind Luo Nan. Knowledge and power that were hard to estimate surged within. Luo Nan was the tunnel that connected the silhouette of light and the real world. Perhaps he was already transforming and transmitting a few things, but understanding was far too difficult. It was to the extent that many people thought to themselves, "Is my level not good enough? Clearly not. If I had more reference information, then I would definitely be much better than that brat Luo Nan." This was the source of all the trouble. Zhang Yingying's thoughts were a bit off track. Luo Nan's explanation continued. Realistically speaking, the configuration design of the Blood Intent Ring Fortress is already very basic. However, this foundation is established within the context of a complete and vast system. It's like the 4 operations. It's admittedly simple, but if you haven't even learned basic numbers, it's impossible to understand it from thin air. After all, abstract things are always a distance away from intuition. Zhang Yingying reacted. You're going to teach them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? They're not kids anymore. They have the ability to understand. Maybe they can learn a bit more about the basics. Regardless of whether or not Zhang Yingying understood, Luo Nan used his current vision to observe the example from a few months ago. The amount of information he grasped and the depth of the level could no longer be mentioned in the same breath as before. Just as he was able to guess the era imprint of the fortress's structure, he was also able to grasp the difference in the school of thought behind its design. From his perspective, the design of the Blood Intent Ring Fortress was more like a branch of the School of Creation. It was the famous school of the Heavenly Yuan Empire in his dream. Liang Lu, Officer Go Yi, and Master Xingzhan were all from this school. Its characteristics were strict and precise. It was highly generalized and coordinated. No matter how chaotic the beginning was, it would eventually form a strict system after a few rounds of adjustments. Moreover, it was most suitable for seamlessly merging with man-made objects. It possessed a high degree of compatibility and adaptability. The Ring of Blood was an obvious example. from the scattered and volatile energy and information of a group of ability users to solidify into a special wedge-shaped structure, and then layer upon layer to form a fortress. It perfectly embodied the structure and logic of creation of this line. However, this branch had extremely high requirements for basic thinking, especially configuration thinking. Only Luo Nan was able to lay down a solid foundation in the Mist Labyrinth, a unique environment unimaginable to ordinary people. Only then was he able to be like a fish in water in the relay station environment. The majority of ability users on Earth, including those in Xia City, might not even be able to understand the concept of configuration. It was truly difficult for them to cheat and think about improvements within such a strict system. In comparison, the School of Fantasy seemed to be a bit livelier, at least in terms of the use of the syncopator. Didn't we send them the design of the syncopator? Let's start from there. Since it's called syncopator, they have to cut it and separate it. Only then can it be considered as working. You can take note of this. Oh. Zhang Yingying reacted. She suppressed her worries for now and raised her voice. Tell me, how do you want them to cut it? In essence, the fortress is a system structure that is simply piled up. Every participant adds bricks and tiles to it. They use everyone's soul strength to construct the blood intent ring. It is a subsystem of the larger system. Through the interaction with other similar subsystems, the main function of the fortress is constructed. Of course, they have already been given a few rules in the initial design. That is why they are called the fortress and not anything else. What they need to do right now is to first put effort into their blood intent ring. Yes, I know they have been researching it, but their research tools are inadequate. Whether it is the bracelets or the external talismans, they all lack the ability to instantly adjust and switch. It will be different if they switch to the syncopator. It seems very empty. Are you sure this isn't a shopping advertisement on a radio station? I understand. Zhang Yingying was enlightened. Although she was still a bit doubtful about the practical effects, she quickly firmed her stance. She displayed 120% of her acting skills. She pinched an extremely pleasantly surprised tone and strove to play the role of a supporting character. Can the syncopator be used to replace the blood intent ring bracelets? Speaking of which, that stupid, big, black, and thick thing gets into trouble every 2 or 3 days. And then there are the talismans and stickers. Even Gao Tianshi himself deeply hates them. Of course it can be used. It's just that the requirements to use it are quite high. It's not too friendly to the fleshly side. Oh, the built-in chip can be broken. Once you grasp the basic mode, and the corresponding software layer can automatically correct and tidy things up. It shouldn't be a problem. Luo Nen was referring to the situation in the Heavenly Yuan Empire. Based on his experience in the relay station, a well-trained maintainer could basically use a syncopator with a certain number of units at ease. It was true that there was the support of the Jade Crystal Array, but there was no need to use it in the complicated situation of resisting the evil poison. As for the corresponding chip, software layer, algorithms, and the like, weren't there a large number of professionals? The Xia City branch, the Xia City government, the military. It would be a waste not to use these resources. Next, Luo Nan gave Zhang Yingying a few basic techniques for operating the syncopator, as well as a few things to take note of when using it to replace the blood intent ring bracelets. Well, time was tight, so it was inevitable that the writing was sloppy. In any case, it was impossible for Luo Nan to waste too much energy on this. He spent about half the time he spent chatting and drafted the text and design sketches. He tossed them to Zhang Yingying and ignored the matter on the other side. The minute disturbances brought about by the telescope disappeared, and Luo Nan returned to the tranquil and peaceful environment of his research. He let out a long breath, and his gaze swept over the situation around him. The surface of the sea, which should have been the vastest, was currently filled with mist. It obscured his line of sight, but most of it stopped at the edge of the beach. Only a few wisps of smoke overflowed, following the slapping of the fine waves against the shore. Occasionally, the smoke would advance a few steps before quickly reversing back. On the beach, there were all sorts of machinery and junk scattered about. The largest one was obviously the flying car that Meng Chong had driven over. Not far away, There were places for the syncopator and the deep blue walker. There were also some that were simply piled up in sand. It was extremely simple and crude. However, the most eye-catching thing was the deep blue walker that stood at the edge of the beach. This exoskeleton armor had already been assembled. It was quite formidable, but the cockpit was empty. There was not a shadow of a person. There was one person who stood face to face with this exoskeleton. Meng Chong. This professional and calm high-ranking member of the Bloodflame Order was in a bewildered and awkward state. In Luo Nan's design, he was an emotionless tool, but he was also an extremely important calculation node. How Luo Nan would experience it, manipulate it, and use it all depended on his heart. Luo Nan and Zhang Yingying had chatted across space, giving Meng Chong a buffer and an opportunity to think. However, he had wasted this opportunity. He faced the mechanical creation in front of him, and his mind became more and more muddled. The more he thought, the more bewildered he became. He felt Luo Nan's gaze and looked over. His expression was rather complicated. Do you want to rest for a bit? No, I can. Luo Nan knew that Meng Chong had fallen into a trap when he saw this kind of reaction from Meng Chong. No. Meng Chong was gradually entering an optimal state. Chapter 953. Luo Nan had spent quite a bit of effort on Meng Chong in order to make the prop better, and to better approach the design situation. He had also given Meng Chong tangible benefits. Then you can experience it again. Remember, you are a big, irascible fellow right now. Irascible, extremely irascible. Your instinct is to recklessly destroy everything. All living things are your fuel. This isn't some high-level thinking or world-destroying plan. This is a low-level instinct. It is a need for survival. This is the basic requirement for your survival. It is a unique driving force established on a specific physiological basis. It is like the food of animals, the photosynthesis of plants. Luo Nan was undoubtedly describing the Hellfire Tyrant right now. It was the great sovereign-level foreign species that had appeared in his dream, and nearly pierced through the relay station. As for why he had to do this, it was naturally to restore the battlefield of the relay station. Of course, Luo Nan didn't want to completely restore the scene. Instead, he wanted to reverse infer the basic environment of Vanguard Planet 4 from the changes in the dynamic resisting impact. This was the only valuable frame of reference that Luo Nan could find. Everything was done to deal with the greed of humans that was vaster than the Pacific Ocean. In order to restore the scene, Luo Nan seriously combed through his memories. He roughly classified all the elements in his memories into 5 parts. The first part was naturally the Heaven Abyss system represented by the relay station's defense forces, various facilities, and even the space-time fortress structure. The seemingly random flying cars, junk, and sand piles on the beach were in fact a sand table reconstruction based on the internal and external layout of the relay station. The deep blue walker at the forefront of the beach represented the highest combat power of the front lines at the time. It was Sir Shi Yuan, who had gathered the power of the Standard Array and other systems, and Lieutenant Lu Andy, who had replaced him. The second part was the largest opposition of the relay station. It was the great sovereign-level magnetic cloud jellyfish with its own massive servant army. Right now, it was represented by the surging thick fog on the surface of the sea and the waves that pushed against the shore. The foggy seawater seemed chaotic, but there were complex configurations flowing and changing inside. They were constantly combining and decomposing, carrying out rational attempts at a hierarchical structure. As a result, they were quite sensitive to external stimuli. Luo Nan wasn't joking around with Zhang Yingying. What he said was completely true. The third part was the Hellfire Tyrant that Luo Nan requested Meng Chong to play. Although that fellow was summoned by the magnetic mica jellyfish, it had a relatively independent characteristic. Moreover, it was able to support a tripartite situation at the time, affecting the entire battle situation at the front lines, so it was singled out. The fourth part was already no longer a material existence, but rather a fatal environment that couldn't be ignored in the greater context of the light concealment galaxy. Evil poison contamination. Be it the elite troops of the Heavenly Yuan Empire, or the fantasy breeds and extraterrestrial species at the great monarch level. They were all affected by this environment. The fifth part was the final goal that Luonan pursued. It was the framework and specific parameters of the space-time environment that bore all of this. Luonan obtained inspiration from the fantasy mimicry technique and the super-configuration theory by using this sand table style of structural restoration and contrasting deduction. At the same time, it was also an experimental requirement that he could not bypass. As he digested and absorbed the fantasy mimicry technology and the theoretical basis, he tore it apart and crumbled it. In a way that the inner world on Earth could understand, he gave Meng Chong immediate guidance. You have to be confident. This big guy I'm describing, and the divine powers it's displaying are very similar to the supernatural powers of your order. In other words, it's very likely that a certain similarity exists on the lower level of the structure. Therefore, I don't want you to imagine, guess, or imitate. Instead, I want you to calm your mind and use the method I'll teach you. Patiently and meticulously divide it down. Find the lower level structure of the blood flame order's blood and fire powers, and then adjust it. You'll get twice the result with half the effort. As Luonan spoke, several dozen centimeters shuttled and crisscrossed around Meng Chong's body. They flew up and down, helping Meng Chong experience this feeling. Meng Chong's brows were locked tight. His face was taut, and a bloody light flowed within his eye sockets. It seemed to be so dense that it could explode at any moment. But in the end, the burning sensation of hunger and thirst still only appeared in his imagination. Whoosh! A long sound similar to the sound of evaporation rang out, and Luonan immediately called for a stop. Slow down for a bit. The corner of your eye is cracking. Only now did Meng Chong feel that the corner of his eye and the side of his cheek were a bit strange. It was probably because of the cracked corner of his eye. Blood flowed down, but it was soon evaporated by the high temperature of the bloody flames. Meng Chong didn't care about such a small injury at all. He took a deep breath. Again, Luonan shook his head. I still need to slow down. I need to manifest the structure, the level, and the element of a leap. This isn't something that can be accomplished just by relying on the bravery of blood. Luonan put away the centimeters as he spoke. Meng Chong's thoughts weren't too clear to begin with, and they instantly became much more chaotic. He really couldn't hold on any longer. Meng Chong closed his eyes and slowly let out a long breath. The taste of blood clearly stuck to his lips, teeth, and throat. He was injured, and it wasn't light. This was the price of helping Luonan with his experiments. It wasn't that Meng Chong didn't have his suspicions, but now that he closed his eyes, the vivid imprints that were branded into his memories naturally emerged. These were the few fragments that Luonan had displayed before Meng Chong's eyes when he had helped Luonan with his experiments. They seemed to have been dyed in color right now. They were a field of blood red. Of course, the most important thing was the structure, and even the image that transcended above it. Even though it was intermittent, it possessed a stifling guiding force, an extremely high degree of compatibility, and an inconceivable sense of intimacy. Every time Meng Chong retraced, the blood and energy in his entire body would boil. It was as if he wanted to exhaust all of his energy to mend the incomplete parts, to make a complete appearance. But in the end he still wasn't able to touch that level. Even though he disregarded everything and forcefully catalyzed his blood and energy to the point of accumulating internal injuries, there was still an insurmountable distance between him and the level of those few configuration fragments. But no matter what, Meng Chong was a veteran cultivator of the blood flame order. He could affirm that any cultivator of the blood flame order who saw these configuration fragments would have doubts, but they would have to be prepared to become a joke. Even though these fragments didn't represent the inevitability of the development of the blood flame order system, they already possessed the function of road markers. They clearly marked a path forward. On this level, truth and falsehood had already lost their meaning. If Luonan was able to tamper with this matter to this degree, then the blood flame order deserved to be squeezed and toyed with like cattle and horses. Oh! Meng Chong suddenly came to a realization. His eyelids trembled a few times, and he opened his eyes once more. His gaze cast toward Luonan, and he saw that Luonan was controlling over 100 syncopators. Luonen was moving shadows around his house. Luonen was focused like a child addicted to a game. In reality, Luonen was only 16 years old. Meng Chong felt that this was rather absurd, but these thoughts were washed clean in the blink of an eye. He hesitated for a second, but he still opened his mouth and said, "Sir, I really don't have the strength to handle this matter alone. Is it possible to brainstorm in the order?" The flying ant beside Luonan buzzed. Luonan's eyes didn't even glance over, but his voice was very clear. "Sure." Chapter 954. Many thanks, sir. Meng Chong felt that it was a bit odd the moment the words left his mouth. But after careful consideration, he felt that there was nothing wrong with it. Luonan finally turned around and looked at Meng Chong. His lips hooked. "No need to thank me." These weren't some polite words. Luonan agreed to this matter completely out of practical necessity. As mentioned before, the simple model on Zeolite Beach consisted of 5 parts according to Luonan's design classification. The space-time structure that bore the elements of the first 4 parts needed to be deduced and calculated in the end. Only then would there be results. Sin poison was a complete disorder and distortion on the level of the rules. According to the theory of superconfiguration, this toy could be said to be the result of messing up the superconfiguration of the cosmic system. Luonan relied on his own experience and feelings to attempt some post-processing. He did a bit of simulation, but it was all virtual right now. He couldn't think too much about it. What he really needed to simulate were the relay station, the magneto-optical mica, and the Hellfire Tyrant. The more ethereal these 2 elements were, the more important these 3 elements were. Therefore, Meng Chong's role as the Hellfire Tyrant was indispensable in Luonan's model design. The current Luonan was a bit like a core enterprise in the supply chain. He wanted to produce a final product, but there were a few problems with the supply of certain materials. He was choked by the neck. It wouldn't be a problem for him to spend a huge sum of money to help the upstream suppliers upgrade. But now, Meng Chong took the initiative to express his intentions to mobilize resources to solve the problem. He wouldn't take advantage of Meng Chong. It could be considered a win-win situation. Luonan didn't have the time to care too much. No matter how important Meng Chong's role was, it was just a corner. Luonan was much more tired than Meng Chong in terms of model requirements. The Heaven Abyss system of the relay station and the magneto-optical mica required him to sketch, fill, adjust and perfect them. Luonan was currently mainly restoring the Heaven Abyss system. From the course of promotion to field officer, it could be confirmed that after the era of Sin, the Heavenly Yuan Empire had built all of its large ships and infrastructure around the Jade Crystal Array in order to fight against the evil poison. There had never been an exception. Even the entire civilization in the Light Concealment System was built upon the Jade Crystal Plane that Monarch Chang Yishuan had transformed into. Luonan didn't feel that he had the ability to reproduce the Jade Crystal Array. He just knew the smell. Then he strove to make all of his external activities manifest it. In comparison, there was another aspect of the Heavenly Abyss system, which was possibly even more ancient than the Jade Crystal Array, and had an even purer quality, which was the Standard Battle Array. Together with the Jade Crystal Array, they were like the wheels of a chariot or the wings of a bird. They supported the Heavenly Yuan Empire's most basic form of warfare. Luonan was much more proficient in the domain of standardized arrays. Though the formatted space of Earth's Deep Blue platform was an inferior version of this kind of collective configuration, it still gave him enough experience to accumulate. Coupled with his solid thinking of configuration, he understood it without any obstacles. That was why he was able to construct a simple and crude sand table model that possessed substantial meaning. He even took it a step further and assembled the Deep Blue Walker to carry out even more concrete experiments. At this moment, dozens of syncopators were flowing up and down inside and outside the empty exoskeleton armor that Meng Chong was standing face to face with. It was very lively. A syncopator was circling around Luonan's body as he drew closer to the Deep Blue Walker. This scene looked a bit strange, so much so that Meng Chong, who originally wanted to say a few more words, unconsciously pursed his lips. His breathing also became quite a bit slower. Luonan attentively watched the back armor of the Deep Blue Walker. allowing the two syncopators to flow. Changing modes to converge allowed the incorporeal exchange of energy and information between him and the Deep Blue Walker to manifest in a relatively direct manner. In the Heavenly Yuan Empire, the syncopators were primarily used as a medium for the Jade Crystal Array. They were used to make up for the risk of releasing soul strength outside of the body. Here, Luonan relied on his accumulation of configuration and spirituality to turn them into a versatile auxiliary tool. They were used to make up for the physical structure and extended functions of the virtual component. And after researching the relevant information of Lieutenant Go Ye's fantasy mimicry technique, Luonan was no longer limited to the level of mechanical constructs. He was moving toward the field of bionics and even more expansive. For example, he could simulate himself. The cold and hard outer shell of the Deep Blue Walker that had yet to be painted faintly lit up with a glimmer. Without Luonan's command, Meng Chong, who was still standing in his original position, subconsciously blinked his eyes. Beads of blood seeped out from the cracked corners of his eyes that had yet to heal. But this didn't hinder his senses. Block fire? The standard array was a two-person combination. There were no problems. Luonan used the work area of his left eye's virtual vision to mark out the experimental form. This was clearly a habit he had cultivated in the relay station. When working outdoors, the virtual vision was more convenient than the projected work area. Just now he had used the support of the syncopators to simulate the state of Luonan, the rookie recruit, and Liang Luchu's partner. Of course, this was the appearance of the simulation in the relay station environment. He didn't stop there. He continued to simulate the changes. The light on the armor was somewhat reserved, but the pulsation frequency was higher. It was accumulating considerable explosive power. This time it was the standard Sub-3 type array. This was Luonan's state after he temporarily joined Mobile Squad 9. Of course, he wasn't satisfied with a single individual simulation. Instead, he sought the experience of collective strength. Buzz, buzz, buzz. A portion of the two syncopators began to show irregular disturbances, but they were soon diverted by the other syncopators. They dissipated into nothingness with a wave of vibration. Next, the front lines. Bang, 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 bang. At least a third of the syncopators exploded, and exploded just as the energy changed. They weren't able to injure Luonan and Meng Chong, but the outer armor of the Deep Blue Walker rang with clanking sounds. Luonan laughed bitterly. Sure enough, it still wouldn't work. Sir Shi Yuan and Lieutenant Lu Andy used their individual bodies to converge the vast power of the relay station and the standard array of over 10,000 soldiers and soldiers. They were undoubtedly on the level of a senior lord. Even though Luonan was able to grasp a bit of the train of thought of the collective configuration, there was a world of difference in the base number of units from a single Deep Blue Walker and the crude models that followed it. Without a foundation, there was no way to talk about structures, levels, or leaps. Yes, this was the predicament of not being able to find an upstream supplier. Should I think of another method? The syncopators seemed to be pretty much ruined. Luonan scratched his head. He prepared to clean up the mess, but he saw Meng Chong staring at him. What's wrong? The order isn't interested? Meng Chong shook his head. The beads of blood from the corner of his eyes flew off to who knows where. At the same time, he tried to lean forward with his ramrod straight body. He was a bit embarrassed, but he was more serious. I was just thinking. I don't understand Sir's teachings. I might not be able to convey them properly. Otherwise, Sir could come to the order to teach, and let the members of the order see Sir's graceful bearing. It was really hard for Meng Chong to say these half-literate words. Luonan discussed the matter as it stood. You don't understand? Which part? This? If it was possible, Meng Chong naturally hoped that Luonan would speak from beginning to end. It would be best if he could speak until Meng Chong completely understood. Of course, it would be even better if Meng Chong could directly tell him the standard answer. Luonan could roughly guess Meng Chong's thoughts from his expression. He was just about to speak when a communication wave from several thousand kilometers away gave him another disturbance. This number was very unfamiliar. Luonan didn't want to pick it up, but he considered the special times they were in. He hesitated for a moment before answering. Hello, who's this? Meng Chong had already thought of an excuse, but he could only shut his mouth when he saw Luonan like this. A voice that didn't ring a bell was transmitted to D City through Luonan's sensing channel. Chief Luo, this is Shirshinha. Shirshinha? The voice sounded unfamiliar, but it also sounded a bit familiar. The other party should be able to sense the doubt and alienation in Luonan's tone. But his attitude was still very proper. Yes, Chief. I'm a student of the Scavenger Project team. I'm currently in charge of the detection and sensing module. This time, Luonan didn't wait for the other party to finish speaking. He dug out this person from his memories. Fortunately, he had just discussed this project team with Zhang Yingying. It was spicy and fragrant. His memories were in an active state. Yes, you're the assistant designer and internal tester. The one who nearly lost his life in the last accident. Yes, Chief. It's me. Shirshinha's reaction was quite pleasant. Luonan had an impression of this person because this fellow was an active member. He had a rich background in military research and experiments. He often had some insights and his temperament was jumpy. He was very courageous. He dared to upload any temporary designs into the Bloodwill Ring's fortress. He had caused over a dozen accidents, big and small. Last month, the project team had been collectively trapped in the Bloodwill Ring's fortress. Luonan's mind had wandered to D City at the time, and he wasn't able to deal with it in time. Something big almost happened. It was said that this fellow was the instigator, a typical troublemaker. However, Luonan heard that Gao Tianshi and Papercut had a good impression of him. It was fine as long as Luonan knew who this person was. In name, this person was his subordinate. Luonan continued to chat. Why, are you looking for me? Shirshinha's voice grew more and more excited. It was to the point that his words were a bit incoherent. It's like this, Chief. I'm currently undergoing safety training in D City. It's the cause of the last accident. I just heard that you're here. Can I follow you for a period of time and listen to your teachings? Oh, I'm not saying that I want you to specially teach me. I just want to learn your configuration theory. I won't take up too much of your time. Just treat me as an orderly. What the heck? Luonan had some thoughts before. He thought that Xia City's military and political system had reacted quickly and came looking for him to discuss cooperation. Now it sounded like it was completely different. That's right. The government's reaction would always be a bit slow, right? Luonan thought for a moment and asked, How did you know I was in D City? Sorry, Chief. News is flying everywhere right now. It's coming from every level. Shirshinha's words were a bit hesitant. His words were quite subtle. It seemed that he was hinting at something. Plus, he displayed the appearance of an admirer, but his words and actions were a bit subtly out of tune. Luonan had a general grasp of this. He thought about this person's background. Regardless of whether it was true or false, this was at least a relatively interesting beginning. Plus, he kept the communications open. His gaze swept over the simple model of the smoke and the beach. A few seconds later, he spoke again. How many people do you have? I'm saying, how many ability users can you gather? Military, government, and all sorts of people. How many do you have? Chapter 955. It was 5 o'clock in the morning in Xia City. He Donglu rarely got up at this hour in 10 years. Yes, it was also because he had a family dinner last night. It was rare for him to spend a night at home, so he naturally couldn't stay for long. He casually tidied himself up and tiptoed out. The house he Donglu was in was the residence of his grandfather, the former commander-in-chief of the Air Force, General He Chong. After the old man retired, he always stayed at home, doing some inexplicable research. He was close to a state where he didn't step out of his house. The old man felt that this was pretty good. It was just that active members of the grandchildren generation like He Donglu had it tough. They would be brought back for 1 or 2 days a week to be educated. They wanted to play big, but they had to be overcautious and indecisive. It was very unpleasant. He had gotten used to it over the years. As he grew older, He Donglu also learned how to adjust. When doing things, one had to learn how to first restrain and then release. First hold back and then feel good. One had to adjust the threshold of excitement. Like this, he could fly again for the next week. 5 minutes is up. He Donglu sent a message to his bodyguard Old Si, and yawned again. He followed the safe route he had already chosen and walked downstairs. The house was quiet. After turning a corner, the courtyard corridor and the courtyard became one. The lights in the courtyard and the extremely weak first rays of dawn on the horizon were taken in together. They blended together with the light that seeped through a crack in the door of a room on the other side, forming a distinct color. What the hell? He Donglu suddenly stopped. At this moment, the continuous vibrations in the air reverted to a vague voice in his ears. The old man's voice was full of energy, but it was a bit clearer in comparison. At least He Donglu could hear it immediately. It didn't make sense. He Donglu subconsciously sized up his surroundings. He was sure that this was the safe route he had chosen. The old man was old. He slept short and light. He woke up early every day, but he would usually walk in circles in the small courtyard on the other side, practicing boxing. What was he doing in the greenhouse and sunroom until the sun was high up in the sky? Young Master Lu, the unexpected greeting made He Donglu's chest thump. The hair on the back of his head stood on end. He suppressed the scream with great difficulty and turned his head. He saw the old man's professional bodyguard, Old Zhang. He didn't know when he had appeared behind him. This old bodyguard was said to be even older than the old man. He had followed the old man for nearly half his life, and was a true confidant. He was also a person who had almost become a demon. He Donglu truly felt apprehensive in his heart. He forced a smile. "Oh, Uncle Zhang, my grandfather woke up early enough. Who's disturbing him so early?" Mr. Zhang is talking to the commander-in-chief. Old Zhang maintained a certain distance from these relatives of his. The Mr. Zhang he spoke of was actually He Chang's eldest son, He Donglu's father, and the chief of staff of Xia City's coastal defense force, He Buozheng. When He Donglu heard this, his calf cramped even more. He subconsciously wanted to turn around, but Old Zhang was right beside him. If he turned around like this, he would be like a thief. It was truly too awkward. After a moment of hesitation, the old man's voice from the sunroom became clearer. "If you want him, then give him to me." He was young, but he was a world-renowned professor. It was just a matter of having one more or one less appointment letter. It's good for a few of them to be students and teaching aides. It can be considered as practice outside the school. It's better than them being drowsy in class. Next, it should be He Buozheng speaking. His voice was a level lower, making it hard to hear clearly, but the old man quickly brought it up again. "Don't let people be scared out of their wits. I was the one who approved your enlistment in the army, and I took care of you a few times against your conscience. But you're used to doing things for others. You rise and fall, and in the end, you can't become a commanding officer. You have to run for election when you come back. Let's not talk about whether you succeed or not. In my opinion, if there's such a good thing, you might as well send a few of the monkeys at home over. It's almost the 22nd century, but their brains are still spinning in the box of the last century. You have to go too. You should go the most. It's also because I'm old, and I have more pessimistic things. I feel that I won't live long enough to reform myself. Otherwise, I would have gone too." Holy crap, this old man is getting more and more long-winded. He's inexplicably giving long-winded speeches. "Little old man, you have to hold on." He Donglu was confused as he listened. He felt that the situation was far from good. His scalp and ears itched. He no longer hesitated. His heels automatically spun, and he was about to walk back. Who knew that there would be repeated bangs from the stairs behind him? A coarse kid would jump down in 2s and 3s and yell, "Brother Lu, you're early." Shishu. This time, He Donglu was truly startled to the point that his entire body was covered in cold sweat. He hated that his hands were too short and weak to cover that person's mouth. The kid behind him was called He Dongliang. He was his third uncle's younger cousin. He was still in middle school. Recently, he had been infatuated with extraordinary strength. Every day, he would wake up early to temper his muscles and bones. He had a body full of muscles at such a young age. And he was still clamoring about paying respects to a famous teacher and learning a peerless skill. It was said that the old man was seriously considering it. He was truly insane. Speaking of which, although He Donglu's position in the family was that of a big silk pants, this coarse kid in front of him could knock him out of the hallway with his brute strength. However, due to his rich love history and uncommon aesthetics, he had accumulated quite a few people over the years. There were also quite a few brainless fans in the family. The kid in front of him was one of them. It was just that today, this kid's brainlessness truly wasn't the right time or place. No matter how He Donglu tried to stop him, it was still too late in the end. On the other side of the sunroom, the sound of footsteps could be heard after a while. The half-closed door opened, and He Boijing appeared at the doorway. His round face, which had always been regarded as amiable by outsiders, was currently stiff. He didn't give his son a good expression. "You come here." He Donglu inwardly cursed, "I'm done for." Then, he fiercely glared at He Dongliang. The latter also knew that he had stirred up trouble. He stuck out his tongue, and was about to turn around. Who knew that the old man in the sunroom would raise his voice? "All of you, come over and accept the mission." "Yes, Commander." He Dongliang was a hothead in the end. With a roar, he walked over with vigor and vigor. He Donglu increasingly had no reason to refuse. He could only brace himself and walk towards the sunroom under his old man's cold gaze. Just as he arrived at the doorway, he heard the old man's chuckle. "Little bastard, you've persisted for more than half a year, right? Your willpower is up to standard. Who are you going to find to learn skills from?" "Of course I have to find someone with great ability. We also have such conditions." He Dongliang puffed out his chest and belly, full of confidence. He Chong grinned and laughed heartily. His mouth was wide, his nose was straight, and his face was rosy. Although he was nearly 90 years old, he still had a lot of black hair, and his body was still very robust. In his early years, he had experienced the aberration and the 3 wars. His family had died early, and he only married and had children for the second time when he was almost 50 years old. As a result, most of his grandchildren were still young. Truthfully speaking, he rather doted on them. Especially a hothead like He Dongliang, who was the most to his liking. Therefore he deliberately teased him. "You want to smash your old man's little treasury?" He Dongliang snorted disdainfully. In this day and age, how many capable people can use money to smash things? He Chong was greatly amused. "That's right. Little Dongliang's idea is the best. It seems you have a plan." "That's right. There's no need to beg others. When I get back, I'll mention it to Sister Yuan. Isn't my brother-in-law in the palm of my hand?" He Donglu let out a pft, but he suddenly felt something was wrong. When he looked again as expected, his old man's face had already darkened. Chapter 956. You're messing around. You're carelessly calling me by my name. It's rude to create something out of nothing. He Chong was the first to berate, but there was no particular anger on his face. Kids these days were born with the skill of observing body language. Even He Dongliang, this bastard, had some attainments in this. He had confidence in his heart, and his foundation of a newborn calf that was not afraid of a tiger was revealed more and more. "I'm just talking about it at home. It seems intimate. If Sister Yuan gets angry, then that's really rude. Aren't you talking about me taking him as my master? Who doesn't try to get close to him before taking him as their master?" He Chong really wasn't angry. He just averted his gaze. Kids always do whatever they want. They have a good eye for picking people. What about you? Yeah, me? He Donglu had just stuffed back his stifled laughter when he saw the old man's eyes focus and lock onto his position. He was naturally apprehensive. He felt baffled. How did he get involved in this matter? "It's you." He Chong hooked his finger at his good-for-nothing grandson by the door, telling him to come into the room. "It's rare for you to wake up so early. Let the two of us have a chat." He Donglu walked forward in a daze. He walked 2 steps and suddenly came to his senses. "It seems like I really can't get away." Speaking of the 3rd generation of the He family, aside from He Yuan, he was the one who had more frequent contact with Luonan. The old man asked, but what could he do? He could only walk closer and say whatever was on his mind. "Yeah, That fellow is a bit weird. He's quite honest when it comes to normal communication. He doesn't have any bad intentions. After the appearance of the blood intent bracelet, He Donglu specifically went to find Luo Nan to discuss the matter of cooperation, but he was shamefully rejected. And the reason for the rejection was very bizarre. He said that the item was a defective product and couldn't be circulated as a commodity. He was quite angry at the time, but the situation developed as Luo Nan said. He stumbled all the way and was limited to the laboratory from beginning to end. There was practically no possibility of developing it in quantity. This way, He Donglu could be considered to have helped him bypass a pit. He Donglu's evaluation came from this. He felt that he was quite objective, so he grinned twice. He Buojing shot him a cold glance. You can actually laugh. You took the initiative to make friends, but because the business didn't go through, you came back with a long face. What a big face. He Dongliang was shocked. Brother Lu, you dared to throw your brother-in-law's face. Did you offend him? A blade under his ribs, a blade in his face, suddenly spurting out blood. No matter how cowardly He Donglu was, he was still somewhat unable to restrain himself. In front of an old man, why would he be afraid of a little old man? Why don't you say that I put my arm around his shoulder and did the whole thing with him? Wow. He Dongliang's eyes lit up. The moment He Donglu spoke, he regretted it. Especially when he saw the chief of staff He's long face. He hated himself for being stupid. He had actually blocked the bullet for He Dongliang, this little bastard. He quickly went back to make up for it. It's just a description. That guy has a weird temper, and it's not easy to get close to him. But these few months, I've been hanging out with his friends in the circle. Second brother Xia, third brother Hu bamboo pole, papercut, octopus. You can't just mess around with one or two of them. He Buojing commented coldly. A wine and meat friend. I'll endure my ass. If He Donglu was truly afraid of his father, then he wouldn't be a big silk pants right now. He immediately rolled his eyes. If I want to be friends until the end of my life, I still need you to make up your mind, no? He Buojing's face truly darkened. Shooting your mouth off. You think yourself clever. In the end, He Dongliang was young and inexperienced. He was a bit muddle-headed. He Chong waved his hand. Go train. Good habits can't be easily changed. Bad habits can't become inertia. Oh. But the master you want most likely won't have the time to teach you. You have to ponder a bit more. He Dongliang gave a thumbs up. I know. I have a backup plan. He Chong laughed in spite of himself. You even have a plan B? Of course. Isn't there an old saying? If I can't be his disciple, I'll be his junior. He has a master, even though he only teaches him body arts. The room was silent for a second. He Chong slapped his thigh and laughed. In your dreams. Get the hell out of here. He was really driving him away. He Dongliang had long wanted to slip away. How could he care about showing off after receiving the imperial edict? He didn't care about his own cousin. He turned around and ran. He Chong's gaze turned to He Buojing after the little fellow ran out the door. He said, You unenlightened brat. You're in high spirits. You're just watching the excitement. Those who have truly entered the door probably only hate that their brains aren't enough. If you're going to send people, then send elites and properly learn things. He Buojing grunted. He could hear that he was still a bit hesitant. He Donglu curled his lips. It was just that this little action was discovered by his father. He Buojing had always found this son of his to be an eyesore. He immediately reprimanded. Let's not talk about other families. You can only dig out some unbearable things from your eyes. He Donglu was already in a bad mood. Now he was hit in the face with a stick. He was clearly being used as a punching bag. He couldn't hold it in any longer. His temper flared up and he laughed. No matter how unbearable I am, I can still be considered a candid dog meat friend. When he returns to Xia City, I'll find a chance to set up a party. I'll invite him a few times. He'll have to give me some face. I'm a hedonistic son of rich parents. Do you think there are 5 families in and out of Xia City that can do this? This also includes Xia, Hu, and the others who are already in the circle. That's right, he's doing this for the sake of his older sister. But he can't stand us having strings swinging back and forth, right? Hidonglu. Hidonglu's voice immediately dropped an octave, but his mouth still couldn't be sealed. You. The main character doesn't care about what we're bickering about, but the hearts of the people around us are as clear as snow. We're just relying on my older sister's branch for our friendship. But don't treat her as if she's truly surnamed He. Get lost. I'll get lost. I'll get lost. Young Master Hidonglu's spirit rose. He had quite a bit of an unscrupulous grandeur. He turned around and left. However, just as he turned halfway, he felt a slight pain in the back of his leg. He had already suffered a blow, nearly kneeling on the ground. We're talking father and son. How can you wander off topic? He-chong retracted his leg. His face was still beaming. Don't mind your dad. Right now, he's gesticulating about jumping off the boat, afraid that he'll fall off the boat. I want to listen to your opinion and ignore him. Hidonglu loved to hear these words. Even if he knew that this was an old man coaxing his grandson, it was the same. He patted the side of his pants twice, dusting off non-existent dust. He didn't even look at the expression of someone beside him. He relied on his emotions and raised his nose to the sky. I'm just a fair-weather friend. I'm in the outer circle. What can I know? I've said everything I can just now. At most, I'll add a few more words. I'll leave it here. He's a great Buddha under the heavens right now. Let's not talk about how he's doing when he's alive. Even if he's dead, at the very least, 800,000 people will accompany him in death. He's not like the rotten leaves in the market. He can be casually plucked a few times and put on the scale. I, a hedonistic son, can't hang on to that weight. I can't seduce the cheap daughter of my family. Even if a certain someone spits out his old face, he might not even be able to find a balance. Chapter 957. Hidonglu slammed the door in anger, or perhaps he was flustered. The sound of his footsteps quickly faded into the distance. Bodyguard Old Zhang closed the door expressionlessly, restoring the sunroom to its previous quiet atmosphere. The glimmer of light on the horizon could not overcome the brightness of artificial lighting. The transparent glass ceiling was also painted snow-white by the light. He-chong narrowed his eyes and extended his hand. Even Donglu can't hide your thoughts from me. He Buozhing's ashen complexion gradually returned to normal. He lowered his eyelids and sat back down next to his father. This kind of thing has always been done or not done. Done or not done. That's right. It's a joke to hide it too deeply and make people misjudge it. Speaking of which, you really are afraid of the other side. He-chong was not prepared to judge his son's level of political operation. He only found the most important part. Being in Xia City, under their eyelids, I'm afraid of the flood of the deep blue world drowning me. He Buozhing did not hide anything. He answered bluntly. Donglu said that Professor Luo is a great Buddha. These words are true. Ouyang and Wujiang must be worshipped well. But you also know that no matter how strong they are still golden bodies under the heavens. Li Wei, on the other hand, has to look beyond the heavens. He-chong opened his mouth wide and laughed hoarsely. A nest of toads looking at the sky from the bottom of a well, but they still have a human brain. That's quite amazing. This was clearly not a good evaluation. He Buozhing could only pretend not to hear. But He-chong would not let him off so easily. In your eyes, what is the current situation? What do you want it to become? Crane and clam fight. Fisherman reaps the benefits? When immortals fight, mortals suffer. Or are you saying that you want to play the legend of the three kingdoms? He Buozhing had yet to think of how to answer when He-chong said, Last night, Joseph contacted me. Lieutenant General Joseph? In this circle, it was impossible to cause a misunderstanding when Joseph was mentioned, even if it was a common name. After all, there was only one person in the world who could be stationed at the forward base on Europa and become the next marshal of the aerospace army. He Buozhing was immediately startled. What did he say? Just some gossip. Nothing too substantial. But why don't you find it strange that Joseph didn't call you? Why did he call me a retired old man? After 2 seconds, He Buozhing replied, You are his former superior, and in the military world, no, in every aspect, you are still the pillar of the He family. He-chong grinned again. Looking at the situation, I should throw half of my wealth into the LCRF and struggle for another 30 to 50 years, instead of taking care of these flowers and plants at home. But I'm old and retired. Sooner or later, there will be a day when I don't even have the strength to pull your ears. Before that, I have to remind you that as soldiers, apart from playing politics, we also need to know how to fight a war. Dad, Hichong pursed his lips. Suddenly, he raised his leg and kicked his son hard in the face. You're still in coastal defense, and you're the chief of staff. Are you clear about the enemy? Have you figured out the level yet? Did you get the location right? How big were they? If you don't understand these things, you're not even qualified to be a staff officer, let alone fight a war. He Donglo's footsteps were hurried as he rushed out of the main entrance. He finally had the courage to look back. Luckily, he didn't see the little old man send people to capture him. Only then did he let out a sigh of relief. At this time, his car had already arrived by his side without a sound. The car door automatically opened. He Donglu let out a breath and sat in the back seat. His personal bodyguard, Old C, was already sitting upright on the other side. He silently bowed in greeting. Baoqing, the driver in front, turned his head and asked, Master Lu, where are you going today? He Donglu sighed. He was inexplicably bored to death. He didn't want to talk, but at this time, he glanced to the side and saw the video system in the back of the car turn on. This was nothing. He had spent quite a bit of time inside. His bodyguard and driver watched movies and played games to pass the time was nothing. It was just that, hey, this guy. He Donglu pointed at the projection screen and shouted. Wasn't the inexperienced young man that the camera pointed at, Luo Nan, who caused him to be reprimanded and criticized? Old C responded, Apologies, Master Lu, He Donglu didn't care about this. He pointed and asked, Is this a video from before? That can't be right? No, it's a live broadcast. Huh. This is an internal channel of the military. It's mainly targeted at burners. News travels quite fast. There are also people doing live broadcasts of situations that don't involve secrets. He Donglu interrupted him and went straight to the point. In T-City? Xia City's military did this? Old C was slightly startled, but he immediately confirmed, it's in T-City. The host is Major Shinha. He's currently training in T-City. He received a temporary order to cooperate with Professor Luo to carry out an experiment. It's not secret. To be precise, he obtained Professor Luo's permission to record and broadcast. That fast? He Donglu was truly shocked. Didn't the old man and the little old man not decide to give it to anyone? They've already started? Not yet. The personnel aren't all here yet. It's just a trailer right now. He Donglu rolled his eyes. The military is also playing this kind of game. Honestly speaking, from He Donglu's point of view, the live broadcast over there was too straight. It lacked technique and didn't have any content for the time being. It just followed behind Luo Nan's, and watched how he played with the debris and sand on the beach. There was really nothing to write home about. But looking at it from the most realistic perspective, the current Luo Nan could cause chaos in the He family with just a name from several thousand kilometers away. Naturally, he had the qualifications to do so. Old C, a calm character, had opened up a live broadcast room and continued to pay attention. The military's live broadcast didn't have a count of the number of viewers, but for Old C to be alarmed, it couldn't be that small. If this was in the past, young master, he would most likely spit at this sort of thing. It would be hard to avoid a few sour words. But he had just stood up for that fellow at home. He couldn't turn the situation around for a while. Professor Luo. Cough. What's Luo Nan's situation right now? I'm saying, you're looking at him with such eagerness. What's his position in your circle? Old C was silent for a moment before replying. This isn't something I can evaluate. So what if I talk about it? Of course, He Donglu wasn't satisfied with this answer. He was just about to continue questioning when he saw Luo Nan start to converse with that Major something on the live broadcast screen. Under the influence of the whistling of the sea breeze and the crashing of the tide, the sound quality could only be described as okay. One could hear it clearly, but one couldn't understand it. It was normal for a layman to not understand. He Donglu wasn't surprised. He just asked Old Si, "Tell me, what's he talking about right now?" Chapter 958. Old Si grunted. Sure, Xinhe is asking Professor Luo how to arrange his time in a while, how he needs the people coming later to cooperate, and what effect he wants to achieve. Professor Luo said that the experiment on the beach is only the first step. He might need to go to the sea to see the results. Stop. He Donglu promptly called a halt to this meaningless transfer that treated him like an idiot. You don't need to translate this. I can understand. I want to know about the more specialized things. Old Si hesitated for a moment before changing the direction of translation. According to what Professor Luo said earlier, his experiment this time is based on a type of fantasy configuration theory. But this time, he isn't prepared to involve too much theory. Instead, he is going to demonstrate a configuration that leans toward practicality. In fact, this isn't a lecture. It's just an impromptu live broadcast of the experiment. He won't specifically explain it. When the time comes, it will depend on each person's ability to understand. You don't need to explain this. He Donglu powerlessly waved his hand. Could it be that he was acting like a retard? I just want to figure it out. Is there any value in what he is expressing right now? How does it compare to the ring of blood and intent from last time? Forget it. I'll just ask an expert. It was really too difficult to ask a professional bodyguard to explain extraordinary theory. He Donglu tossed and turned for a long time before he finally found the correct train of thought. He began to flip through his address book, considering which ability user he knew was more like an expert. Yes, it was more reliable to find the circle around Luo Nan at this time. It was also more suitable to close the distance between them. Within the circle he worked hard to manage. The one with the highest cultivation was undoubtedly Bamboo Pole. Moreover, he was also on the mental side. He was just right. But. The important turning point had to be emphasized 3 times. That fellow Bamboo Pole appeared to be greasy and lecherous, but he was actually impervious to everything. He was shrewd and powerful. During this period of time, his status in the Xia City branch had risen with the tide as he entered the architect sequence. His influence was rapidly rising. He Donglu was a bit apprehensive to communicate with him alone. He didn't feel that he could take advantage of him. How about he switched to someone else? The names on the address book skipped over a few grids, as they quickly swept past. As for the others, they either didn't have a professional match, or they didn't have a good personality. They could drink and chat, but it seemed that they weren't friends yet when it came to asking professional questions. After thinking it over, He Donglo 2 figures appeared in Lu Cheng's mind. One was Xie Junping. That fellow had become an ability user. He'd practically broken away from the circle of Xia City's hedonistic playboys. But his family background was there, and he was in the business circle of Xia City. The He family's name was still useful to him. As for his cultivation, it didn't seem to be too good. However, he had a good teacher, so he should be able to make it. As for the other person, He Donglu almost didn't think of him at first. It was only when he saw the address book that he made the connection. That chubby, ordinary-looking middle-aged uncle. It was too cruel to put it that way. He seemed to be a loner. He didn't remember his real name. He only knew that his nickname was Papercut. This person didn't stand out in Luo Nan's circle. The reason why He Donglu paid attention to this person was because this person seemed to have participated in the earliest development of the Bloodwill Bracelet's external talisman paper. Of course, the main developer of the external talisman paper was still Gao Tianshi. However, Gao Tianshi was a veteran B-rank psychic. His connections in Xia City were deep, and his status was transcendent. He was someone who could directly deal with He Donglo's old man. He wasn't as easy to get along with as Papercut. As for Papercut, He Donglu knew after a few encounters. He had a kind face but a soft heart. He was honest, patient, and easy to bully. It was just that his cultivation was mediocre. It seemed that he played support. He was mediocre in all aspects. Even though he was psychic, it was hard to look forward to having him explain things. He Donglu thought for a moment, and decided to contact Xie Junping first. He had a bit of a psychological advantage when it came to this person. He wanted to see if he could use papercut to contact the supposedly powerful Dean Wan. However, the call didn't go through. This made things a bit awkward. Could it be that it was too early? He looked out the window. That was indeed the case. But time waits for no man. He hesitated for a moment before switching to papercut. This time the call went through quickly. Hello. The other party's voice was a bit muddled. It was clear that he had just woken up from his sleep. Cough, brother. Papercut? The other party mumbled a few times. He probably saw the caller ID and became a bit more clear-headed. He Donglu, young master, he? Brother Papercut, are you still asleep? He Donglu quickly understood when he sensed Papercut's current state. It seemed that Papercut didn't know about Luo Nan's live broadcast in D-City. This made things easier. He Donglu thought of an excuse on the spot. He didn't need to think too much about it. The news itself was the best reason. He Donglu's attitude became more and more natural. Brother Papercut, I was looking for bottle just now, but that fellow wouldn't pick it up no matter what. It was a bit urgent, so Oh, he's doing his morning class right now. He needs to focus. Cut off all communications. It would be better to call him in half an hour. Papercut turned over, huffing and puffing. He struggled on the bed, but his honest nature was exposed. If you have something urgent, I can help you call him. Hey, you're next to him. Yeah, I was playing with the children at the orphanage last night. It was too late, so I slept here. Do you have something you need? He Donglu slapped his thigh. It was said that Xia City was evil, but now he caught two of them at once. He became even more relaxed. He giggled and kept Papercut guessing. This is exclusive news. Oh no. Pa. This time, He Donglu slapped his head fiercely. Holy crap, he's definitely not awake yet. If the exclusive news of Luo Nan's live broadcast was only circulating within the small circles of the military in Xia City, then He Donglu could directly go find Ouyang Chen, let alone Papercut and Bamboo Pole. Of course, this was a bit of an exaggeration. But once He Donglu figured this out, Papercut was a bit lacking in comparison. He Donglu couldn't really hang up. He sighed and said, "Just treat it as me being kind and telling you guys that Luo Nan is in D-City." His words were cut off halfway when he suddenly stopped. Papercut sighed as well. Of course he's in D-City. You slept quite early last night, right? He Donglu was disinclined to bicker with this misunderstanding. He just shifted his gaze and looked at the unimpressive live broadcast. It moved forward half a second, and a very familiar word jumped into his ears. Luo Nan repeated it again at this time, and He Donglu instinctively repeated it. Papercut. Yeah, little bro Donglu. Donglu if you want to call me, it's better to add brother. Right? He's talking about you. He's talking about you. Ha. He Donglu smacked his thigh again. This time he really hit it. He no longer hesitated. He shouted, "Where are you?" Chapter 959. Did you take too much last night? Who's looking for me? Looking for you, my ass. Hurry up and send me the address. Otherwise, I bet you'll regret it. My God. Papercut's remaining sleepiness was completely dispelled by He Donglu. He confirmed the time and finally made a painful decision. He struggled out of bed and prepared to properly deal with this overly excited hedonistic young master. I said it earlier. It's the welfare home. Dean Wan's welfare home. I've never been there before. What about the name? Where's the map? Lan Town? I think so. It's in the Forest Wall district. Papercut finally surrendered completely. I'll send you the map. He Donglu slapped the front seat and gave the driver an order. I'll give you 10 minutes. Forest Wall district, Lan Town's welfare home. The car quickly started, but Old C calmly said, 10 minutes is impossible. It will take at least half an hour to get to the western suburbs from here. Then half an hour it is. Not a second more. He Donglu was still unclear what this coincidental discovery would bring. There was only one thing he was sure of. This was much more interesting and useful than the debauchery he had planned. Papercut knew that He Donglu wouldn't arrive anytime soon, but he wasn't in a hurry. He just put on a pair of pants and went to the bathroom to freshen up. He squeezed some toothpaste as he comforted Papercut. Hey, little brother Donglu, for the sake of the secretary, can you talk about the main point? I'll help you think of an idea. You said just now, who was looking for me? He Donglu let out a ha laugh. The crucial information advantage actually brought him the thrill of crushing his IQ. However, Papercut's temper was really good. He still had the patience to accompany others in pedantry. He Donglu didn't want to keep him in suspense. No one was looking for you. Someone mentioned you. It was that super worrisome boss Luo of yours. Oh? Papercut had just stuffed his toothbrush into his mouth when his movements froze. He Donglu couldn't see Papercut's appearance, but he could feel the rapid change in his mood. He grew happier. He wasn't broad-minded, so he immediately used giving them a taste of their own medicine, and snorted, "Humph. So it's not that I slept late. It's that you guys didn't wake up early enough." Luonan started his class early in the morning in T-City. It seems like there's quite a scene. Start the class? Papercut's voice suddenly rose an octave. He nearly bit his toothbrush in half. He Donglu subconsciously grinned. It seems like I have to practice some configuration techniques and give lessons to that project team member. The main thing is still to do experiments. Right now I'm broadcasting it live. Puff, puff. Papercut, she spat out the half-melted toothpaste and tossed her washing utensils aside without bothering to rinse her mouth. Why haven't I heard anything? Zhang Yingying is with him. Didn't I tell you? Then why are you talking about me again? Which channel? Where's the link? Link? He Donglu asked Old Si. Soon after, he gave him a piece of unfortunate news. You guys are unable to access the military's internal channel. F***ck. Papercut cursed loudly. He picked up his shirt and walked out of the room. He maintained his connection with He Donglu, and he entered Luonan's friend group on the Psychic Wave Network through the Hexa ear. Last night, Zhang Yingying had sent him information and data related to the syncopator, as well as the subsequent discussion. However, there was no news at all regarding the live broadcast He Donglu spoke of. Zhang Yingying, hurry up and wake up. Boss Luo's live broadcast is something you don't care about. The military is stuck in our heads. Zhang Yingying didn't reply in the first instance, but there was an octopus that had gotten up early or hadn't slept at all. It sent a sluggish emoji. It was all Zhang, but it was useless. Oh no. Papercut only realized that he had made a mistake when he was outside. The lower half of his body was only wearing a pair of large underpants. He hurriedly flashed back and carelessly put them on. He grabbed the waist of his pants and skipped out. But this time he saw Nurse Wang of the orphanage draped in clothes when he reached the hallway. She stuck half her body out from another room and stared at him expressionlessly. The breathing of some children in the rooms on both sides began to become chaotic. They were clearly alarmed by Papercut's uncontrollable and loud voice. "Oh my!" Papercut exclaimed in a low voice. He instinctively extended his hands to put his palms together in apology, but he forgot to pull up his pants. Fortunately, his body was wide and fat. His waist and crotch blocked it, so he didn't make a big fool of himself. However, he was still in an extremely sorry state. At this time, He Donglu's voice was transmitted over again. He seemed a bit hesitant. "Yes, I feel like you're a typical negative person." Papercut stood on his tiptoes, gritted his teeth, and held his breath. He waited until he reached the entrance of the orphanage before he opened his mouth. "Share, transcribe, remake. Whatever. Immediately send the video over for me to see." For Papercut, this was a rare and urgent tone of voice. "You'll have to wait a bit." He Donglu was willing to help, but the operation required time. Papercut's reasoning was understanding, but his emotions were unforgiving. His heart felt like it was being scratched by a cat. In a few short seconds, a layer of sweat had already accumulated on his forehead. At this time, the friend group had already exploded. First, there was a large queue with a sluggish expression. Then Zhang Yingying reacted and left a message. "I got in touch. I'm going to find out." After destroying the queue, There was no follow-up for the time being. Nearly everyone had been awakened by the explosion. They were speculating, discussing, and tagging Papercut, the first-hand news provider. Papercut originally wanted to join in, but his heart was truly overgrown with weeds. He Donglo's few words had stirred his mind into a trance. What is Nanster teaching? Why did he mention me? Typical negative person. Does it have to be this serious? Papercut walked to the entrance of the orphanage in a jumbled state of curiosity, ignorance, anticipation, and even worry. Suddenly someone called out to him. Uncle Paper, Uncle Paper. Awewu? The one who called out to Papercut was the most promising kid in the orphanage, Diwewu. He was also the adopted son of Papercut's old friend, Di Dongwa. This kid had quite the backbone. Even if Di Dongwa would complete the procedures to adopt him with just a word, he was still willing to live in the orphanage with the other orphans in the orphanage. Diwewu was also a diligent kid. Every day, he would wake up early to train, rain or shine, to build a foundation for his future cultivation. Seeing the sweat on his head, he had most likely returned from a round of training. Uncle Paper, are you leaving now? Oh, I have a bit of business. Papercut stopped mid-sentence because Dongwa had begun to transmit data. It was not a live broadcast, but a transcribed video. To increase efficiency, I'll send it one clip at a time. Damn. Papercut decisively turned around and walked back. Uncle Paper, Uncle Paper? Diwewu felt baffled as he quickly caught up. The reason for Papercut's choice was very simple. This was a commercial society. No matter how good Xia City's infrastructure was, it was impossible to achieve full coverage for a rotten place like the recycling stratum. The orphanage was a public place. It was already the area with the strongest signal. Donglo's decision to send the video in segments was very wise. The first video, which was a few dozen seconds long, was quickly transmitted. Since Papercut was connected to the psychic wave network at the same time, the video was sent over. It was not suitable to be projected onto his retina, so he could only choose to play it outside. Diwewu, who was playing the role of a follower, went wow. Brother Luonan. Papercut ignored the child's messy way of addressing each other. He just stared at the projection area. He looked. No, he listened to the information being transmitted. In the video, there was a simple and stable background of a beach and a focused image of a human figure. Aside from being able to confirm Luonan's existence, there was no other value to it for the time being. The only thing that was truly meaningful was the voice. Chief, why do you need so many people? So many burners? Chapter 960. The one speaking should be today's host, Major Shirshinha. Papercut had dealt with him quite a few times, so he had an impression of him. He knew that Shirshinha was a very smart fellow. Luonan's answer was very concise. It's convenient for experiments. Normal ability users can't do it. From the perspective of experimental design, it's inconvenient. Luonan's answer made people feel stuffy. It looked like this live broadcast really wasn't a class. At least for now, it was purely a casual chat. Luckily, Shirshinha was able to stick to it. How is it inconvenient? It's not tidy. Not tidy? Papercut didn't understand. He naturally hoped that Shirshinha would ask a few more questions. But Diwewu was the first to express his dissatisfaction. Uncle Paper, why are you staring at Brother Luonan's but like that? Where's the sound? Here. Papercut used the external playback function to deal with the troublesome little fellow. He looked forward to what would happen next. However, Shirshinha, the temporary host, exposed the butt of a military burner. He forcefully jumped to the other side. Burners are more orderly, but this orderly refers to. This time Luonan's answer was a bit longer. There are more rules of manual selection. They can be used as relatively unified basic modules, and they can be arranged appropriately. There are fewer variables. Papercut let out a stifled laugh, drawing Diwewu's attention. Uncle Paper, what are you laughing at? I'm laughing at how your brother Luonan's mouth has become smelly. This is mocking the burner's modification technology, right? Papercut was a bit uncertain when he said this. It seemed that Luonan didn't have any prejudice against burner technology. He had always been researching and utilizing it. There was a period of time when he used the burner simulator to learn, and he spent great effort to modify the deep blue walkers. Papercut saw all of this, and at this time, Diweiwu blinked. Really? Hehe. Papercut scratched his head. He was finally able to free himself from the video a bit. He discovered that he and Diweiwu were stuck in the entrance hall of the orphanage. It was quite silly. He grabbed Diweiwu's shoulder and continued to walk inside with the little fellow. Having learned his lesson earlier, Papercut didn't dare to go upstairs and disturb others. He found a place to rest their feet in the hall on this floor. The two sat on a bench and continued to peek their heads out to watch. The video continued to play in the projection area. The progress bar was already very close to the end, but what made Papercut suspicious was that his so-called negative example appearance had yet to arrive. Luonan was calmly piling sand on the beach in the video. From time to time, the camera would swing back and forth, and one could see that there was already an undulating pile of sand on the beach. The amount of work involved was not small. Luonan's skill level was quite high when it came to piling up sand. He didn't need to truly make a move. He just pointed through the air, and the relevant area bulged and deformed. In the eyes of a child like Diweiwu, there was quite a bit of mystical color to it. In fact, Papercut was paying close attention as well. A mental type awakened who excelled in using the mind to interfere with matter, such as Papercut himself, could accomplish this as well. However, it was very difficult for him to be like Luonan, lifting something heavy as though it were light. He thought back to when he taught Luonan the soul strength activation technique. Luonan couldn't even handle a paper man. Now that he thought about it, it felt like a lifetime had passed. Papercut was a bit absent-minded while Shirshinha continued to ask, since there are rules, what are the rules for ordinary ability users compared to burners? Shirshinha's words had the suspicion of starting a fight, but he also had the drive to get to the bottom of it. Plus, this question really suited Papercut's intentions. Luonan, who had his head buried in piling up sand, finally turned around. He clearly had some time to think before saying, "This isn't something that can be explained clearly in a few sentences." Then say a bit more. Of course, Papercut was saying these words from several thousand kilometers away. At best, he was trying to make Diweiwu laugh. Shirshinha didn't dare to continue with Luonan's words. He couldn't see it through the camera, and he could only stare blankly at the actual situation. A few seconds later, Luonan finally followed up. "Let me give you an example." Okay. Shirshinha's expression couldn't be seen, but his voice had the suspicion of maliciously acting cute. He was also trying to coax Luonan to say a bit more. Over at the orphanage, Diweiwu chuckled when he heard this. On the other hand, Papercut felt his his entire body stiffen when he heard the word example. Only his heart thumped loudly in his chest. He had received Hidonglo's spoiler warning beforehand, so he couldn't help but think of something. Isn't this the place? Papercut saw that Luonan's eyes were a bit vacant in the camera. He had the posture of reminiscing. Last year I was in Xia City. I had just entered the circle not too long ago, so I lacked general knowledge. Many friends in the branch took turns teaching me. I have a friend who taught me soul activation techniques. Soul activation? You mean the transcendent ability to control special equipment and carry out long-range attacks and defenses, right? Shirshinha was a qualified supporting character. He was knowledgeable, responsive, and able to quickly follow up with the main point. Luonan nodded. You're talking about the control class. Back then, Brother Papercut, the friend who taught me this technique, said that soul activation techniques are divided into the activation style and the control style. The control style is more practical. Wow, Uncle Paper. Brother Luonan flipped your card. Diweiwu was both surprised and excited. He shouted loudly, his voice shaking the roof. Papercut disliked the noise he was making and his words were preposterous. He wanted to reprimand him, but when his lips moved, he felt that his mouth and throat were dry. He had to use a lot of strength. His throat squirmed with difficulty before he found some saliva to moisten his throat. He swallowed it down with a gulp. The thought of scolding Di Weiwu had long since disappeared. There was only one thought left. This time, my reputation is going to be lost to the entire world. In the video, Luonan wouldn't change his tune just because of Papercut's nervousness. He continued to speak very naturally. I learned this technique in order to experience the mutual interference between the mind and the material. I was muddle-headed about many things at the time. Everyone said whatever they said. But now that I think about it, there are some things that are worth questioning. Finished. At this time, the progress bar of the video hit the end. It broke. It broke right here. Uncle Paper, what's going on? Di Weiwu was enjoying watching the excitement. He was obviously dissatisfied that the video suddenly broke. F***ck. He did it on purpose. Papercut smashed his fist on his knee. He nearly choked on the saliva he had just swallowed. The video started early and started late, but it just had to break right here. If that kid He Donglu didn't do it on purpose, then Boss Luo would have become a well-behaved baby. He nearly dialed the number again, and cursed out loud. Luckily, he saw that the second video was almost finished downloading. I'll endure. Papercut, calm down. First, I'll send the video I just finished watching to the group. After a few minutes of fermenting, the group completely exploded, and the shockwaves began to spread across the psychic wave network. However, there was still no news of Zhang Yingying. The video Papercut sent over only served to add fuel to the fire. Bamboo Pole was indeed the smartest one. He felt that something was wrong the moment he saw the format and duration. Transcribed. This mover's work is too rough. We want the live stream link. Live stream. Live stream. Who's calling Zhang Yingying right now? My line has been busy. She's communicating with Boss Luo, right? Both sides are busy. Why isn't Luo Ui playing his cards according to the norm? The replies in the group were stirred up, but they soon ran out of steam. Needless to say, they all went to watch the video. Papercut suddenly discovered that it was quite foolish of him to waste time on this. His thoughts spun, and he returned to his own side. The second video had already finished downloading. There was still a third and fourth video to follow. He was too lazy to waste any more time, so he just shared these files with the group. Then he disregarded everything else and clicked on the video to continue watching. Luckily, the video was seamlessly connected to the previous ones. Even if there were missing parts, it was impossible to tell. This was because Luonan had a casual chatting appearance. Brother Papercut only taught me basic knowledge on soul activation techniques. As for the practical operation, it was to control the paper men made from talisman paper. However, I couldn't do it well no matter what. Even if I succeeded, the power was extremely weak. There was no practical use at all. This troubled us greatly. Of course, I later discovered that this was a problem caused by the special characteristics of my soul strength, and the imbalance between my body and soul. I strengthened the coupling of the mental and material planes by strengthening my fleshly body cultivation. I finally solved this problem. Lead leader, you really aren't good at telling stories, Shirshinha ridiculed. Papercut could more or less understand the meaning behind Luonan's words. Di Weiwu turned to look at him at this time. Uncle Paper, does what Brother Luonan said have anything to do with what happened before? Papercut chuckled, but he still did his best to help Luonan explain. Your brother Luonan is probably saying that as an ability user, soul strength has its own special growth and usage pattern. But no matter what, it must be based on the material plane. I know this. The dean has always emphasized that. The little fellow shut his mouth halfway through his words. This was because Luonan had mentioned another matter, and it was still related to Papercut. After this matter was resolved, there were a few days when I was distressed by the explosive increase in the scale of my soul strength. So I called Brother Papercut. I wanted to ask him about soul activation techniques. I wanted to know if there were any ultimate secrets or big moves that could achieve large-scale instantaneous consumption. These words are asking for a beating. Papercut muttered a comment, and Di Weiwu rolled his eyes. However, the little fellow was soon captured by curiosity. Uncle Paper, you even taught Brother Luonan a big move. Listen carefully. Papercut tried to interrupt the little fellow's train of thought. But at this time, Shirshinha and Diweiwu realized that their thoughts were synchronized. Shirshinha muttered to himself, the big move of soul activation. What is it? Nothing at all. Then Brother Papercut recommended me to learn Her Majesty Empress Wu's dripping sword. Is that so? Shirshinha laughed dryly and reacted. That move shouldn't be a high-consumption move. I'm saying that the core value of the dripping sword lies in the condensation ring. Chief Luo, you've talked about this before. It was during the last public lecture. But what does this have to do with Mr. Papercut? Shirshinha had single-handedly steered the conversation back on track. One could imagine how many people who were watching the live broadcast were giving him likes. If the military's live broadcast system had a reward function, it would certainly explode. It didn't matter at the time, but now that I think about it, Brother Papercut's words weren't appropriate. He compared the activation style to the control style. He believed that the former was more suitable to be used as support, while the latter was the main combat power. Perhaps he was wrong from the root. I feel more and more that the activation style, which simulates spirituality, is more representative than the precise control style. Is more representative. Shirshinha took 2 seconds to digest this before asking. What does it represent? Yeah, what did it represent? At this very moment, Papercut, who was suspected to be a negative example, became all the more focused. It wasn't just because he was closely related to Luo Nan's description. It was also because he was looking forward to it. With Luo Nan's current level, even a careless sentence might have its own unique value. It might even have some sort of guiding significance. Plus, Papercut was analyzing him right now. Even if it was a bit lacking in privacy, if Papercut really said 1, 2, 3, 4, he would be able to publicly execute Luo Nan, let alone now. Papercut pursed his lips and held his breath. He blocked out all information from the outside world, and only watched the contents of the video. If he cut it off now, he swore that he would strangle that kid He Donglu to death. I feel that it is too rash to artificially differentiate the things of abilities and traits before they are explored in depth. Just like the regulation that you were particularly interested in just now. Without exploring to a more fundamental level. All differences are just shallow expressions. Just like this beach. It doesn't have any special meaning before I start to shape it. If it does, it's just the sand itself. Papercut was a bit stupefied. Shirshinha understood a bit. At the very least, he needed to display this state in order to have a deeper discussion with Luo Nan. However, there is no essential difference between ordinary ability users and burners at the most fundamental level. So what you're saying is that we should explore the structure of an ability? Luo Nan extended 3 fingers. Level, structure, and leap. All 3 aspects must be considered. Whether it is an ordinary ability user or a burner, their regulation is established on a more fundamental level. It depends on the adjustment and optimization of one's ability structure, as well as the possibility and direction of the leap of the existing body and soul system. Shirshinha cautiously asked, "Can you explain in more detail?" At this point, the video flashed and the progress bar reached the end. Papercut's heart tightened. Luckily, the latter part of the video had finished downloading this time. The AI continued. In a normal sense, the foundation of our lives is an unchangeable and established fact. It's like this beach. Even if I piled sand into a castle, it would only be a sand castle in the end. It wouldn't change into any other nature. Humans, or cultivators to be exact, are a bit better. At least there is hope for change. Hello. Luo Nan's voice cut off again. This time there was a call from the outside. The caller was undoubtedly Zhang Yingying. Papercut felt stifled in his chest, but he could only endure it. Luo Nan was talking to Zhang Yingying in front of the live camera. Yes, it's still on the beach. Not on the beach. Just do an experiment. It's not easy to find people to cooperate. Yeah, come over if you want. We haven't officially started yet. The call ended after a few sentences. Luo Nan faced the camera again. This time he still had some conscience. Where were we just now? Cultivators have the hope to change the foundation of their lives. Shirshinha accurately summarized and expressed his original meaning. It's more appropriate to use the word leap. It's like this. A beach area suddenly bulged by Luo Nan's feet. The sand at the bottom was like a gushing spring. It went from low to high, slowly rising up. Every grain of sand was as smooth as a water droplet. They hissed and formed a beautiful sand spring bouquet. Right now, we basically believe that life is a product of a single leap. It goes from the purely material plane to the life plane. We can assume that these ordinary grains of sand have become the living substance. They have formed a series of lives, allowing them to possess basic functions. This is the first end. The first end. Luo Nan didn't explain in depth. He just continued speaking. When life takes form, it needs to maintain its life structure, maintain its basic functions, and allow life to continue. It needs to absorb energy from the outside world, reproduce and live. It forms a basic drive of desire. This is the second end. It seems that I'm going to enter the domain of anthropology and sociology. I'll just go straight to the conclusion. Faced with the memories of nature and complex society, humans have formed a series of experiences that are endlessly accumulated and transmitted, but are relatively fixed. This is the third end. And on the basis of experience and experience, there is a deeper level of application of intelligence. It forms a high-level state represented by logic and spirituality. This is the fourth end. This is a rough division. It can be considered to be 4 small levels. Shirshinha finally found an opportunity to interject. But why is it called end? Luo Nan had a matter-of-fact appearance. Life is full of contradictions. You can't ask it to be like a machine. It must work diligently and earnestly for a predetermined goal. It must work to the end. Shirshinha had a pensive look. He perfectly summarized nonlinearity and reaction. This is the normal expression of the universe. Luo Nan laughed. Therefore, a small leap in the life plane will often be like this. The straight gushing sand spring began to warp. It was no longer beautiful. It was more like a fat snake dancing to the sound of a flute. It was as if it had been drugged. It suddenly turned and twisted in the air without any obstructions or obstacles. Its body collided, and it even swallowed itself and fused with its tail. Look, the mutual interference between them circulates over and over, ultimately forming the structure of the self-format. We will divide this process into 4 levels. Each level represents a great turning point. That is the 4 ends. 5 levels are the 5 ends. And so on. It's not a very precise thing. Luo Nan spoke lightly, but whether it was Shirshinha or Papercut, both of them watched with rapt attention. The camera locked onto the warped sand snake. They watched as it gradually melted into a single mass. There were no longer any pores. It seemed to have some edges and corners, but it was a chaotic creation without a concrete shape. Luo Nan's voice continued to ring. Actually, we can still crack open this thing, and see what kind of core it ultimately forms. As Luo Nan spoke, the outer shell of sand tore apart, but it still maintained a general outline and shape. It just expanded outwards, exposing an extraordinarily neat object within. A sphere. Shirshinha's voice was clearly absent-minded as a footnote. An inscribed sphere. Luo Nan grunted. I'm more willing to call it the self-format. If we follow this pattern and continue to expand its function to a certain degree, it will form a ladder that leads to the fantasy plane. Of course, the initial result will still be. Shirshinha murmured, a sphere. Outside the sphere. The split silhouette of the sand curtain closed up once more. This time, the edges and corners were grinded into extreme clarity. It formed a standard tetrahedron structure with 4 ends and 6 edges. Soon there was a thin film of sand grains on the outer layer. It stuck to the 4 sharp corners, spinning and forming. Formatting theory. Shirshinha blurted out without Luo Nan needing to think. Several thousand kilometers away, Papercut actually synchronized with Luo Nan. However, Luo Nan himself didn't get entangled in this matter. He just spoke to Shirshinha. You're a researcher. You should know that there are no circles in nature. They have always existed on the conceptual plane. It's just that when projected into the real world, some circles are more neat and tidy, while others are like mud. Ordinary ability users are like mud? Shinha's words were a bit lacking in standard. This was a manifestation of his unstable state of mind. Luonan laughed. Even if they're mud, they can be molded endlessly by adjusting the humidity and viscosity. It's quite good. Then the burner. They've already been molded. Right now they are indeed the most suitable. This wasn't what Shinha wanted to ask. Even Papercut and Diweiwu, who were several thousand kilometers away, could feel it. Luonan waved his hand, and the sandball that was connected to the beach shattered with a bang. You don't need to worry about this. I just said that reality isn't that neat and tidy. We can design all sorts of different levels and sequences. Of course, it can take on various forms. Regardless of whether it is formatting theory or the archetype format, the images that they display are merely products of symbolization, Feng Luo said. Impressive. Papercut clenched his fist fiercely and waved it. Diweiwu's brain had long since crashed due to Luonan's theory. He couldn't understand what was going on, but he still retained his curiosity. Uncle Paper, what's your current image? The corner of Papercut's lips twitched. It's most likely just a lump of mud. Luonan, who was far away in T-City, seemed to have a telepathic connection at this time. He seemed to be comforting, but he also seemed to be announcing the answer. It doesn't matter if it's a normal ability user or a burner. As long as they follow this pattern, their form can always be corrected. They can move in the direction that suits them the most. This requires the ability user to continuously cut down, to find more basic components, and adopt a more reasonable structure. For example? Papercut's ears perked up, but what he heard next was the humming of an engine and a military-style chant. Everyone. Luonan interrupted his speech. He turned his head to look toward the beach. Oh, a group came. There aren't enough people. However, we can prepare first. We can teach a few of them, and let them familiarize themselves with Meng Chong. Let's begin. Shinha did not respond for a long time. F***ck me. Papercut really cursed this time. His voice was sharp and trembling. Diweiwu was startled. He looked at his face carefully, and in the end he said, Wu Qing? Chapter 961. No matter how many ghostly wails and wolf howls exploded in every corner of the world, Luonan was determined to begin his experiment. He walked toward the seaside, but it was very rare for the camera to not follow him. The scene captured by the camera stopped at the area where Luonan had just stood. All that was left was a slightly bulging pile of sand. It was the remnant of Luonan's previous demonstration. This was a dereliction of duty, but he didn't need to say anything. Everyone understood. Let alone Shinha, who was close at hand, even Papercut, who was thousands of kilometers away, wished he could beat his chest and stamp his feet. Or he might as well just reach through the projection screen and choke Luonan's neck, making him pour out all the examples in his stomach. The video was cut off at this time. Oh no, it ended. You've gone too far. Papercut swung his palm over, causing the light in the projection area to become distorted, but it was useless. Diweiwu wanted to pat Papercut's chest. Uncle Paper, don't get angry. You absolutely must not get angry. Get angry, my ass. My heart is pumped with icicles. Papercut called Hidonglu back amidst the howl of grief. What's going on? Where are the others? Hidonglu jumped in fright, but he soon used an even louder voice to choke back. Didn't your people already go over? I'm here. In the group chat, this brief message suddenly flashed. Hidonglu cut off the communication at nearly the same time as this message, but he sent a direct remake of the video. It was a few dozen seconds later than the previous video, but there didn't seem to be any useful information in the middle. Instead, there was a rumbling noise mixed in with the distorted external sound. There was also a particularly resonant female screech. Hold on. Start again. Shinha was clearly shocked. The camera swung over, and he saw a female rider riding a jet ski on the surface of the sea, which was still covered in thick fog. She whistled over, tearing through the smoke and waves. She was already close to the shore, but she didn't slow down at all. She simply charged over, filling the air with sand and dust. Zhang Yingying had arrived. Wow. So cool. This evaluation was appropriate, but the one who spoke was none other than Luo Nan, who was outside the camera. The atmosphere of the entire beach instantly changed because of these words. It went from being grand and heavy with life cultivation to being light and lively. This is more in line with his age. Papercut didn't even see Luo Nan's current appearance, but he just laughed unconsciously. He vented out quite a bit of the pent-up anger in his heart. Of course, this was also because Zhang Yingying had already posted the link to the live broadcast under the cheers of the audience. As for seeking Luo Nan's opinion, it didn't exist. Furthermore, she was playing very big. Not only did she use her friend group, she even used the social media platforms on the Psychic Wave network. She was reacting in a typical revenge style. Everyone, spread it out for me. Hashtag. Spread. Anti-Yingying is the best. Timely rain, drought, thunder. Those little bastards from the military dared to steal our people. The fury of the Xia City branch. Papercut was a little flustered when he saw this scene. This shouldn't be a problem, right? His circle of friends was definitely on top of his head. As for what the larger circle of the inner world was like, Papercut still couldn't figure it out for a while. Who cares? In any case, he clicked on the link to Zhang Yingying's live broadcast and saw a high-definition camera directly on Luo Nan's face. You guys actually sneaked away. Luo Nan rolled his eyes. What sneaking? This is a private beach. Didn't you receive a warning when you charged in? This is the territory of the Blood Flame Order. I wouldn't have been able to charge in without your permission. Zhang Yingying's mind was clear. She clearly understood what was going on. That won't do. You need to do it all over again. Of course Luo Nan was unwilling. I said it wasn't a lecture. It was just an experiment. We were just chatting casually. I've already explained the basic theory to you this morning. Plus, I recorded everything. Go back and check the video. I didn't see it. Zhang Yingying lied through her teeth. She put on an unforgiving appearance. There are a lot of people in the branch who didn't see it, but someone else arranged for a live broadcast. And it's an internal channel. As she spoke, she controlled the camera to focus on Shirshinha's face next to her. Unfortunately, Shirshinha was still in an absent-minded state. He didn't even have the most basic response. He completely lacked the self-awareness that a villain should have. Forget it. In any case, it was fine as long as Luo Nan, the main character, acknowledged it. Zhang Yingying didn't really want Luo Nan to record everything again. She just wanted to seize the moral high ground and legitimize her own unauthorized live broadcast. The situation developed as she had hoped. A few seconds later, the ability user circle of Xia City erupted in thunderous cheers. The live broadcast started, and so, without further communication and coordination with their superiors, Zhang Yingying and Shirshinha formed a double camera on Zeolite Beach. They filmed Luo Nan's following experiment process together. Compared to Shirshinha, a military researcher, Zhang Yingying clearly had more tricks up her sleeves. Soon, she made an overall overview of the surrounding environment of the beach where Luo Nan was. Papercut and the others entered the live broadcast room. They saw Shirshinha and the others who had only appeared in Luo Nan's mouth before. For example, Meng Chong. The ability users of Xia City were quite familiar with this powerful fleshly body. Then there were the soldiers of D City, who had suffered a large amount of curses in the beginning. Oh, after becoming burners, they were at least junior officers. These people could barely be considered as officers. Luo Nan had no intention of giving a lecture for the time being. Zhang Yingying was a bit curious about these officers who were still far away. She gave them a few more shots. These people wanted to come over after getting off the car, but Zhang Yingying had inserted herself in the middle. They slowed down their footsteps, looking a bit sluggish. It could be seen that this group of people wore messy clothes. Some were like Shirshinha, who had rushed over in a hurry. They wore training clothes. Some wore officer uniforms. And some simply wore casual clothes. Their tastes are complicated. Zhang Yingying made a basic judgment. She could see some small talk among these people through her lens. They didn't seem to be particularly familiar with each other. Compared to Zhang Yingying, who was a bit distracted for the time being. Sir Xinhe was much more focused. He controlled the main direction from beginning to end. After coming back to his senses with great difficulty, he began to ask Luo Nan to continue talking about the previous content. It would be best if he went a bit deeper. Luo Nan didn't agree. It's purely a theoretical expression. There's no need to be long-winded. Experiments are more practical. Zhang Yingying interrupted before Sir Xinhe could speak again. It's fine if you don't talk empty words, but you can't destroy the mold. Oh my, you're quite familiar with it. I definitely have to do my homework before a live broadcast. Just because I don't have professional skills doesn't mean I don't have professional spirit. Zhang Yingying didn't feel embarrassed at all from having a slip of the tongue. She spoke more and more confidently. Luo Nan couldn't bicker with her. He could only say, that's just a demonstration. It's like a diagram or a slide. Just look at it. Don't be restricted by idealized symbols. It's easy for you to say. No, it's not easy. It's not. It can't be concluded. Luo Nan explained in a pleasant voice. Life is a very complicated thing. There's absolutely no need to set up a precise system, especially when it comes to higher intelligent species. Therefore, all you need to do is grasp the 3 key points of hierarchy, structure, and ascension. There's also the non-linear trend. Then you can use any standard, any angle, and any number of small levels. It's fine. Zhang Yingying's eyes went wide. Anything? Of course. Luo Nan acted extremely certain. I can be a bit more clear. The most important reason why I chose the model just now is that it's very similar to the formatting theory system. I find it pleasing to the eye. That's all. Angle. How about this? I'll give them a mission first. Let them get used to it first. I'll give them a few examples when they have the time. Zhang Yingying raised her eyebrows. You said it yourself. Yet, can you talk about multitasking? Multitasking is my specialty. In addition, I'm afraid that they don't have enough time to get used to it. The other things should be quite loose. Hey, when are we leaving? Luo Nan's thoughts suddenly jumped a bit, but Zhang Yingying was already used to it. We'll leave tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock. T-City is 4,000 kilometers away from the international waters where the auction will be held. It'll take around 5 hours to get there by airship. We'll be able to eat dinner at the auction. Can we leave a bit earlier? I want to go by sea. No problem. Of course, such a small matter wouldn't stump Zhang Yingying. If you want to see the scenery of the sea, we can find a relay station even though there isn't enough time. For example, Koro Base. We'll take a boat tonight. We'll find a few people to drink with, enjoy the breeze, and enjoy the life of night fishing. We'll see if we can catch a few fish. We can arrive at Koro Base tomorrow evening. We'll take a private plane from there and fly at supersonic speed. Half an hour is enough to kill our way to the international waters. Then we'll descend from the sky, wrecking the place. Luo Nan laughed. Then let's go with this plan. Actually, I think it's more suitable to do some follow-up experiments on the sea. Okay, boss. Over at the Lantown Welfare Institute in Xia City, Papercut covered his forehead. The live broadcast with Zhang Yingying's participation was becoming more and more like a chat or lifestyle program. Zhang Yingying was completely unaware of it. Perhaps she was enjoying it. She took the initiative to start a new topic of conversation. Hey, you're lab technician. Or is he the lab equipment? Why do I feel like the guy in the lead looks a bit familiar? Luo Nan shot a glance. Oh, I've seen him before. When did you see him? 2 days ago in Ban City. I was communicating with T-City. He was standing together with someone. Who? Oh, what's his name? Luo Nan's gaze turned to the nearby Meng Chong. Meng Chong had been acting as a wooden stake for quite some time, but his reaction was still fast. Sir should be talking about Cadman, the traitor that Sir has already dealt with. As for the person who came over, he's the captain of Deep Blue's operations stationed in T-City. His name is Hood. I remember now. Zhang Yingying was also someone who had watched the live broadcast, but the more she thought about it, the more shocked she was. Holy crap, someone from Quantum Corporation? It's probably someone who's purely involved in the project. Luo Nan had a sudden realization. He clapped his hands. Your horizons are still not broad enough, Major Sure. Just call me Shinha. Sure, Shinha's reaction was just as quick. Speaking of which, no matter how young and vigorous he was still older than Luo Nan by over a year. But under these circumstances, his attitude couldn't be any more natural. You even called non-military and government personnel. Sorry. No, your thinking isn't bad. Your net is quite wide. The number of people should be a bit more than expected. Sure, Shinha spent a second to make sure that Luo Nan wasn't mocking him. Only then did he respond in a low voice. You're too kind. My connections in T-City are far from enough to support your request, Chief. So I'm just passing on your opinion. It's good as long as the matter is done. Luo Nan was quite satisfied. If we can have 10 more people, the probability of the experiment's success will increase by at least 20 points. Are you sure they'll listen obediently? Zhang Yingying directly pointed out the problem and gave a reminder. Sorry. Sure, Shinha received a call at this time. It was a call from his superior, who was closely monitoring the progress of the situation. He was trying to explain the matter of the candidates to Luo Nan. Chief. Sure, Shinha was prepared to ask Luo Nan to directly contact his superior. But Luo Nan didn't pay attention to him. Or perhaps he didn't care. No need to go through so much trouble. They just need to do very simple, basic work in the experiment. It's fine as long as they're burners. We're all burners, that's right. Captain Hood, who walked over first, responded from a distance. He walked over a few steps and gave Luo Nan a standard military salute. The first batch of the temporary volunteer team consists of 7 people. We greet you. Mr. Luo Nan, we meet again. Zhang Yingying's camera focused on his face. Hood faced the camera, appearing relaxed and at ease. This is the first time we've met. I also greet you, Miss Zhang. All of us signed the agreement of our own volition. We've come here to contribute to scientific research. We can even sacrifice our bodies when necessary. It's quite gratifying to have a beauty like you to record our work. Zhang Yingying's lips curled, but she didn't say anything. This Captain Hood had quite the courage. If he could make his gaze more resolute and not deviate from Luo Nan's direction, then it wouldn't be easy to see the taut string of emotions beneath his carefree attitude. This was a fellow who became more unbridled the more nervous he became. Luo Nan didn't go and experience Captain Hood's emotions and personality. From his perspective, it didn't matter if they were volunteers or experimental subjects. Since they had arrived, the experiment could officially begin. Time was very precious. It was easy to imagine that a considerable amount of time would be wasted. 7 people. We can just barely start it up. I don't have the energy to give you guys an introduction to the experiment's objectives and process. There are practically no segments that require you to use your brains. So for every task I say, you guys will do it. Yes, sir. No one, including Hood, dropped the ball for the time being. They all displayed the style of soldiers. However, Luo Nan didn't have the awareness of a commanding officer. He just followed the prescribed order and made arrangements. First, we need to format the domain. You guys support the domain and maintain it in that state. The group of people looked at each other in dismay. Luo Nan frowned. Is there a problem? The 7 experimental subjects quickly communicated for a bit. In the end, Hood, who was the most capable and had the highest status out of all the volunteers, became the spokesperson. Mr. Luo, can you wait a moment? Not all of our people have arrived. Right now the groups are in disarray. Luo Nan was very surprised. I want the standard of the formatting of the domain. What does that have to do with the groups? You guys formed the groups first. The people behind you can come over and fill in at any time. In theory, this is the case. However, there are differences between us. The main issue is the dynamo core. There are also some issues with authority. Hood was very frank. He adopted a serious attitude to solve the problem. Maybe we need to obtain some authorization. Authorization? That's not necessary. Mr. Luo, please believe in our sincerity. Luo Nan shook his head. I'm saying that there's no need to go through so much trouble. Let's use you as the benchmark. Can you open the formatting domain? He didn't move. He just smiled bitterly. Mr. Luo, I said that due to the differences in the versions, we want to build. That's a problem for me to solve. Huh. Shinha, who had been filming from behind, walked over at this time. Chief, the differences in the versions do exist. Especially with the rapid changes in the versions of the Dynamo Core these days. It's hard to avoid conflicts between the two settings. Luonan turned his face and stared at him. The greatest value of the standard array lies in the standard. If you guys can't connect it seamlessly, then it's the same as completely obliterating its value. The standard array? Shinha was a bit stupefied. Luckily, Luonan's words weren't too hard to understand. He was dazed for a moment before he quickly followed along. We really do need a unified standard authorization process. Luonan shook his head. The standard has always been there. It's just that some people are superfluous. It's inconvenient for others. So let's use you as the benchmark for the time being. Shinha was truly stupefied. He only responded after 2 seconds had passed. Chief, I'm afraid it won't be easy for me to support the framework of the formatting space by myself. He was a researcher after all. Even though he had received the modifications and training of a burner, he wasn't able to reach the level of being able to dominate the domain. That was the ability that only an elite combat elite possessed. Luonan didn't care. The format of fire is no problem. This is fine. Don't be nervous. Luonan sized Shinha up from head to toe and determined the limits of this person's abilities. He felt that it would be better to do the work a bit more solidly, so he made a slight adjustment to the design. We'll start from a more basic level. Come. Be like me. Ha. Before Shinha could react, Luonan bent his right elbow and extended his palm forward. A small patch of air suddenly warped above his thin and slightly red palm. Then the temperature rose and the heat radiated. Finally, rays of light blossomed, piercing into the surroundings and into the eyes of everyone watching the live broadcast. At this very moment, energy appeared in the palm of Luonan's hand in the form of visible light. Due to the effective interference and catalysis of soul strength, it caused an intense burning sensation to manifest in the air. It was like a faintly white flame. The glow of the flame was actually very weak, especially in the brightly lit seaside. But in this moment, the faces of practically everyone in the surroundings were illuminated by this dim light until they turned white. It was as if all the color of blood had been erased from their faces. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.